no planned fire alarm test today. So if you do hear the fire alarm, we will need to leave the building. So please leave by the nearest fire exit, which is likely to be the way that you came into the building, and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is St John's Churchyard. It's about 100 metres down that way. There will be stewards available to direct you if in the unlikely if that unlikely event happens. Hopefully you know where some of the facilities are. If you don't, public toilets, if you come out of this room, go down the corridor opposite this room and turn left, you'll find the toilets at the end of that corridor. And if you go in the other direction, you'll find the public seating area where a number of you, I think, were seated before, where you can find refreshment machines as well if you need a drink or other substance. Finally, please could any mobile phones that you've got be set to silent and whilst the meeting is on. I need to also inform you this meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. It is very important that you address the committee. Please do not disclose any information you would not want to be in the public domain about yourself. So if you, if for example, you don't disclose your address if you don't want that address to be known by people who might be watching a video of this many years hence. So just careful about that. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph or post about the proceedings of this meeting. If you do want to do that, please do be considerate of other people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceedings. If you do decide to take any footage either by picture or video, please do keep your camera pointed towards us, as Councillor Neil is demonstrating at the moment, so that you're not taking pictures of other members of the audience. So you're welcome to take pictures of any of us in the unlikely event you would like our pictures, but please do not take pictures of other members of the audience. You're also welcome to use the council's Wi-Fi. We don't have a password anymore, so you should be able to get straight into that as well. During the meeting, members of the committee are not allowed to access the internet except as it relates to the official business of this meeting, send or receive emails, text messages or social media posts concerning the business of the committee. And that's so that everybody knows that any information we have in front of us is all in the public domain and not in the background. I'd also like to remind speakers, first of all, to use the microphone when speaking, as only the audio from the microphone can be captured on the live stream. It is important, but to those of you who've been to meetings here before, we've recently had new microphones installed, which in some ways are very good, but it does mean that you need to talk perhaps a little closer to the microphone than you might be used to. So please do that to make sure that the audio from this meeting can pick up your voice. And it's also very important not to put your mobile devices next to the microphones. This can often cause interference. That brings us to the first item of the meeting. Apologies. I've received apologies for lateness from Councillor Esme Hicks. She does hope to join us shortly. She has a childcare issue at the moment, but she hopes she'll be able to resolve that to be able to join us in a short while to this. I'm going to ask members to confirm they are voting members by raising their hands, and then we will do some quick introductions. So, thank you. And obviously we will ask as Councillor Hicks to do that when she joins. But just to do some introductions, I'm Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm Councillor for Old Kent Road Ward, and I'm chair of this committee. And I'm going to start, I think I'll start with you, Nick, and go that way.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Nick Johnson, Surrey Docks Ward.
Councillor Gavin Edwardson, I'm Head and Queen's Road.
Councillor Dermo, Councillor Reginald Popula, and Head and Queen's Road Ward.
Councillor Catholic and Robert House, Vice Chair.
And just so that everybody knows who everybody is, I'm going to ask officers to introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Colin Wilson, Assistant Director for Strategic Developments.
Stephanie Bruce-Smith, Legal Advisor to the committee.
I'm Gerald Gola, I'm the Committee Clerk.
Hi, I'm Michael Takaris. I'm Head of Design, Conservation and Transport.
Dave Khan, case officer 7.1. Chris O'Brien, Senior Finance Manager.
Zoe Davis, Strategic Lead for the Programme Management of Production.
Dipesh Patel, Strategic Applications.
Thank you, sir. That's really helpful feedback. Yeah, if people could speak a little bit closer to the microphones, I think that might help. And I think, yeah, because we've got a number of people here that are having to share microphones, that make it a little difficult. But thank you, sir. That's helpful information.
It's Wing Lau, Team Leader at Southwark Planning.
Amy Donovan, DPR. I've been advising the Council on Daylight, Sunlight and Overshadowing matters.
Torben Anderson, RBA Acoustics. I've been advising on acoustics, noise and vibration.
Rob Davis from the Council's Transport Planning team.
Thank you, everybody. So next item on our agenda is notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent. So we've had circulated, as well as the main agenda pack, we've also had an addendum report and a members pack which shows us the slides that we're going to go through, and officers will obviously discuss what's in those items when we get to those parts of the agenda. Disclosure of interest and dispensations. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issue to be considered at the meeting? Thank you. Nobody's indicated. That's very helpful. Thank you. That brings us to item 5 minutes of our meeting on the 11th of February. Does committee agree those minutes? Thank you, everybody. Item 6 on our agenda is release of £2,376,936.12 from Section 106 agreements across the borough to support the delivery of affordable housing in the borough. And a number of officers indicated today, are you talking on this one? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Permission is sought for the release of £2.4 million for from the Affordable Housing Fund against the legal agreements and applications listed in Appendix A of the report. The funds shall be directed to the New Homes Programme to support the delivery of affordable housing within the borough. The fund shall be targeted to support the Capital Programme Refresh Report, which was presented to Cabinet in January 23, committing to building 11,000 new council homes by 2043. The current phase includes 1,000 new council homes to start construction before May 2026. Resources from the Section 106 affordable housing contributions play an important part in the overall funding approach to the council's provision for new affordable homes. The schemes delivered by the council typically deliver a far higher proportion of new council homes than required by planning policy, and hence the Section 106 contributions, along with the grant, right to buy receipts and council borrowing, have enabled the council to take forward this programme of investment. It is requested that Planning Committee approve this release of funds. Any questions can be directed to my Housing, Construction and Finance colleagues who are present to answer any specific questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Zaid. Any questions, members of the committee, about the report? Thank you very much. I mean, obviously, Chris and Zoe, we've got you here. Anything you would like to add before we take a decision? Oh, thank you. In that case, I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraphs 1 and 2 of the report that are set out in page 6 of the agenda pack. Firstly, the Planning Committee agrees the release of funds totaling. Before I do that, I'll slight rewind. Councillor Hicks, welcome to the meeting. If you'd like to just say very briefly who you are and also just disclose whether you've got any declaration of interest.
Thank you. Apologies for lateness. Councillor Esme Hicks, Ward Councillor Ward, no declaration.
Thank you very much. Right. So, Councillor Hicks, you won't be able to vote on this item as you weren't present for the discussion of that, but you will be able to vote for the rest of the meeting. Going back to where I was, I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraphs 1 to 2 of the report on page 6 of the agenda pack, namely that the Planning Committee agrees the release of funds totaling £2,376,936.12 of Section 106 affordable housing funding received against legal agreements that are set out in Appendix A of the report to the New Homes Programme to support the delivery of affordable housing in the borough. And secondly, that the Strategic Director of Resources be authorised to apply the funding released to individual projects within the New Homes Programme. Is that seconded by any member of the committee? I think I saw Councillor Edwards just get there first, so seconded by Councillor Edwards. Thank you. Is that agreed by committee? Agreed. So can we have a show of hands? I think just for that, just that case. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. That brings us to development management, which I assume most of you are here, but for the officers that were there for that previous item, I'll allow you to escape home. So item 7 on the agenda is development management. So the next item of business concerns determination of planning applications. I'd like to remind everyone of the committee the guidance on how we conduct the business. First of all, officers will present the report, outline their recommendations, and answer questions raised by the committee. Secondly, if present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. Firstly, a spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now, you need to have identified a single spokesperson, or if there's more than one objector that wishes to speak, worked out how you will divide that 3-minute time slot between you. Secondly, the applicant or their agent. Thirdly, a spokesperson representing any supporters of the application who live within 100 metres of the development site. And fourthly, a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. So for those ward members speaking and those nominated to speak on behalf of the objectors, supporters or the applicant, please sit as far forward as you can in this meeting. It's quite a packed meeting today, and that's very important in case there are further questions which come up later in the meeting that we'd like to have some further discussion on. That's particularly important, I think, for applicants in the past. So sometimes things come up later on in discussion that we'd like further clarification for the applicants. However, that's not an opportunity to take part in the proceedings for people that are here in the meeting other than those slots where you're allocated to speak to the committee. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which we've already had in the report. The meeting is not a hearing where all participants are allowed to cross-examine the evidence presented by other participants. At the end of each representation, the committee may ask questions of the presenter. And this is probably particularly useful advice for people speaking as actors, but speakers should lead the committee to subjects in which they would welcome further questioning. So 3 minutes can seem very tight for time. So if you feel that 3 minutes isn't going to be enough time, it's probably worth making sure you're flagging up all the issues you'd like to raise, because it may be the committee be able to ask you further questions on those matters. After receiving all submissions, the committee will debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council committee meeting, which is open to the public, but please no interruptions from the audience. Finally, I'd like everyone present to know that although this planning committee does comprise members from different political parties, none of us are politically whipped in the decisions that we make here. So all of our decisions are made in accordance with the council's planning policy and are based on information contained within the relevant reports, together with the consultation responses and any submissions we receive today. And it's probably worth just stressing that we are not a body which makes policy decisions here. We are here to assess applications against those policies that have already been agreed by the full council of Southwark and have been approved by the planning inspectorate. How we approach these applications is set out in the development management report at item 7. If members are happy to note that report, we'll move on to considering the applications. Are members happy that we proceed? Thank you. That brings us to item 7.1, Borough Triangle site at 18 to 54 Newington Causeway, 69 Borough Road, and 82 to 83 Borough Road, London, set out in pages 43 to 388 on the agenda pack, and also on pages 1 to 6 of the addendum report in front of us. So I'd like to ask Wing Lau to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. I would first like to draw your attention to the addendum report. It sets out the clarifications and corrections and some of the late representations that's been received since publication of the main report. Most importantly, there's been an update to the business relocation strategy, which has increased the amount of relocation funds to the traders. There's also late representations of traders on site that have been in support of the scheme. There's also been a letter from Ministry of Sound, which is in support of the application, as it addresses their request for the additional acoustic mitigation measures. There's been an objection received from the Conservation Area Action Group, CAG, and that relates to demolition of the locally listed buildings on the site. There's also been additional public comments, 73 additional comments since the publication of the report, and then other clarifications to the report. And most importantly, should be noted that the recommendation is subject to recommendation for approval, subject to conditions, referral to the Mayor, and completion of the Section 106 agreement, and notification to the Secretary of State. I'll just start my presentation. This site is commonly known as Borough Triangle. It's a key regeneration site, and it comprises almost all of the NSP 44 Newington Triangle site allocation in the Southwark plan. So these are existing buildings on the site. We have the carpoint vehicle hire, former carpoint vehicle hire on the junction of Borough Road and Newington Causeway. We have the Mercato, that occupies most of the site. That's operating on a meanwhile basis since 2016. We also have the Institute of Optometry to the south of the site, and then 82 Borough Road and 83 Borough Road. These are just some of the existing photos on the site. You can see 82, 83 Borough Road, and the entrance to Mercato on Newington Causeway. So the site vision in the NSP 44 states that development must meet these requirements, and that includes provision of new open space of at least 15%. It should also provide retail, community or leisure uses, provide active frontages on the ground floor, and it should provide new homes, and it retain or increase the aggregate amount of employment generating floor space that's already on the site. It's also within the site is also within the Central Activity Zone, CAS, and Elephant Castle Town Centre and Opportunity Area. The site is not within the conservation area, but there are conservation areas within the vicinity. So that's highlighted in yellow on the slides. There are no listed buildings on the site, but there are Grade 2 listed buildings close by. We've got the Inner London Sessions Court on Newington Causeway, and we've got 3 Grade 2 listed buildings to the north on Borough Road. And the site does have 4 locally listed buildings on the site itself. That's 82 Borough Road, which is the Baptist Chapel, which is currently vacant, with 83 Borough Road, which is currently occupied by the London School of Musical Theatre, 38 Newington Causeway, and then the Institute of Optometry. The existing buildings would be demolished, except for number 82 Borough Road, and 83 Borough Road would be partially retained, altered, and refurbished. Sitting on a double basement structure, there would be 4 new buildings, buildings A to D, to provide housing, flexible commercial, and mixed food and drink and leisure uses. The large public space would be in the centre of the site. There will also be a large flexible commercial and mixed food and drink facing Newington Causeway, which is likely to be reoccupied by Mercato or other similar food hall operators. There will also be the delivery of 892 homes. The residential uses are within A, B, C, and D, with building E, which is 82 Borough Road, being the office space. And the social rented homes would be within buildings C and part of D, and the intermediate homes in part of B and the rest of building D. The total of 892 homes are proposed, and out of that, there would be 230 habitable homes in total. But when calculated on a habitable room basis, there would be 934 rooms, affordable habitable rooms, and that equates to just over 35%. And the tenure split would be just over 25% social rented and 9.9% intermediate habitable rooms. This plan just shows you the ground floor uses. The buildings A and B would likely be occupied by retail or restaurant or cafe tenants, with building E on Borough Road well suited to more office or workspace use. And the ground and mezzanine levels of buildings C and D have been designed to facilitate the future reoccupation by Mercato. It's just showing you the southeast elevation to Newington Causeway. You can see building B to the left there, and then C and D fronting the rest of Newington Causeway. You can see building C is divided into two volumes, C1 and C2 at different heights. And this is the north elevation to Borough Road, with building D to the left there, and then number 82 and 83 in the forefront. And building A sits just behind the facade of 83 Borough Road. You can see the Diary House, which is sitting outside of the application boundary, sits in between building D and 82 Borough Road. There's a CGI view of the proposed development looking south and the heights of the individual buildings. As you can see, there are existing tall buildings within the vicinity of the site, such as 251 Southwark Road, the Kite Building and the Pioneer Building on Newington Causeway, but there are also other low and medium rise buildings in the vicinity, including the Scoville Estate, which are bungalows to 3-storey buildings. It is important to note that an application was submitted in September 2022, and following the new fire safety regulations requiring a second fire stair call, and following council officers and GA's advice, the applicant had gone away to revise the scheme. They've acquired the Institute of Optometry and the surrounding land, making that the application site much larger. The heights of the towers have been amended since 2022. So that table below just shows you that in the previous scheme, building A was the taller building at 46 stories, and stepping down to building B at 42 stories. But in this application, building A has been dropped down to 38 stories, and building B being the tallest at 44. The fundamental part of this application is the provision of new public open space in the middle of the site, which is accessible via pedestrian routes from Borough Road to Newington Causeway. And this new public realm would combine play space and commercial spill-out areas. The landscape is split into several character areas, which helps to zone out the landscaping. And the woodland garden in the centre would provide most of the play space, which is publicly accessible. In terms of consultation, the applicant had carried out a series of consultations, and the list there is the engagement they carried out since November 2023 until up to the point of application. They had provided public drop-in events, pop-up sessions, door knocking sessions, and throughout the planning application stage, they had carried out one-to-one meetings with Mercato traders. In terms of the council's own consultation, we put out a press notice in Southwark News, we placed site notices around the site, and we carried out 3 rounds of letters to residents. The consultation radius had also extended in the 3rd round of consultation, with consultation to 400 metres to the north and 800 metres to the south. So at least 15,000 letters were sent. In terms of the objections, just about over 400 objections have been received, and about 20 letters have been of support have been received. That's a combination of 3 rounds of the consultations. Much of the objections relate to the height of the buildings and its impact on the daylight and sunlight of neighbouring properties and overshadowing of local parks. The objections also raise overdevelopment of the site, as the number of homes significantly exceed the site capacity in the site allocation. And objections were also received from traders within the Mercato about the threats to their businesses caused by disruption during development. And these objections also raise equality issues, as existing traders are predominantly from minority ethnic groups, including the Latin American community. But there are also support. There's support from traders that have been received since the publication of the report about the improved business relocation strategy. There's also been support for the additional housing that's been provided, and how the scheme would be of high quality design, and that a new permanent food market would be provided on the site. So the site allocation does require the provision of housing, which this scheme does provide. The development at 892 homes would exceed the minimum capacity at 438 in the site allocation, but it should be noted the site allocation is set out in that is a minimum only, and the proposal would therefore make a significant contribution towards the borough housing targets. The financial viability assessment that was submitted demonstrates that there would be a significant deficit, and on that basis cannot provide any additional affordable housing. The delivery of social rent and intermediate units at policy compliant levels is a very positive aspect of the proposal, given this current challenging economic climate. It is noted the proportion of 3-bed plus homes would fall below the policy requirement of 20% in the CAS, but for the affordable housing, this mix is much above the policy position. This table just shows you the amount of non-residential floor space being proposed. If we exclude the community centre, which is 480 square metres, then the aggregate amount of Class E and sui generis floor space would exceed just over 6,000 square metres, so there's a net uplift on the site. It is proposed that 480 square metres of community floor space provided in the base of Building A, and within the retained part of 83 Borough Road. There would be a net loss of community floor space, but while there is a net loss of community floor space, members should note that the centre proposed would be of a much higher quality and would be leased out at a peppercorn rent, which is a major benefit of the scheme. And the community centre would first be offered to the Latin American cultural community and would deliver one of the council's plans commitments. I'll just pass this over to Dipesh.
I'm just going to take a few slides before I hand over to Michael for design and heritage.
Dipesh, could you speak a little closer?
Sorry, I'm just going to take through a few slides before handing over to Michael for design and heritage. So this slide here gives a little bit more detail on affordable housing. As you can see, there are a significant number of affordable homes, 153 social rent, 77 intermediate homes proposed. In terms of compliance with policy, they would provide 35% affordable homes calculated by habitable room. It would be under 35% calculated by the number of homes. Calculation on habitable rooms is the policy requirement. It's in the London plan and the Southwark plan, so that's the development plan policy target. And the reason for that sort of slight discrepancy is because more homes, more affordable homes, are in the larger units. So I think this pack you'll have committee has got it mistaken in terms of the percentage of 3-bedroom homes. This is the correct one. So 25%, just over 25% of the affordable homes would be 3 bedrooms or more, and of the social rent, 37% of them would be 3 bedrooms or more. In terms of the quality of accommodation, the site itself, the proposal itself provides a good quality of accommodation, good number of dual aspect homes. So in the private sale, just over 44% of the homes would be dual aspect, and the affordable 53, just over 53% of them would be dual aspect. The applicants worked really quite hard to provide enhanced aspect as well. So our guidance doesn't allow for a return window, which I'll talk about in a moment, to be counted as dual aspects, but they've designed the scheme to accommodate return windows to provide for cross ventilation and additional light as well. So this is an example. This is Block C. This is the social rent home, and my cursor. So this particular home there, just highlighted, that's a 2-bedroom social rent home. So while technically that would qualify as single aspect, the return, I lost my cursor. There we are. So this return here would provide additional light, importantly into the living room, and also allow for cross ventilation with a similar situation at the bottom of that, where that design typology is repeated. Similarly, on Block D, this is where most of the intermediate would be. There'd be some social rent on the lower floors, but again, we can see that there's a predominant dual aspect homes with some single aspect homes provided with that enhanced single aspect accommodation. For the market homes, the 2 towers, towers A and B would be the market homes. They would have winter balconies. This is principally to mitigate against noise from noise breakout from Ministry of Sound. So to manage that and provide acceptable internal levels, but also to allow the Ministry of Sound to carry on trading without noise complaints being made. Winter gardens are proposed, and there's just some images of potential winter gardens of how they might look on the right. In terms of privacy within the development, it meets the standard distances of 21 metres in most circumstances. Where it's under that, there are mitigation proposed, such as windows that do not directly overlook. So in terms of privacy, I think the quality of accommodation is good. Similarly for outdoor amenities, so all of the affordable homes would have their own outdoor amenity space. All of the 3-bedroom homes would have at least 10 square metres of outdoor amenity. For blocks A and B, they're the blocks closest to the Ministry of Sound, where those winter gardens are proposed. There would be no outdoor amenity space, but winter gardens would qualify as some type of amenity space for them. There would also be community amenity space distributed around the site, mostly on the podiums for the homes and also on the rooftops. So slide at the bottom of the picture shows the community amenity space proposed. The image showing the CGI is from the podium, so that would be accessed for the affordable blocks. And there is a shortfall in communal amenity space and private amenity space, which then gets added to that communal amenity space calculation. So there'd be a payment in lieu of just over £330,000 for that shortfall. In terms of play space, again, the scheme performs pretty well, providing all of the required play space on site for under 12s. As you can see on the left where the cursor is, this is publicly accessible, so that play space would also be available for residents in the local area. The play space on the podiums would be for the residents of the development itself. There wouldn't be there'd be a shortfall in terms of the over 12s play space, and that would be managed through a payment in lieu of just under £100,000. We're currently in discussion with colleagues in Parks about the planned improvements to the Muga at Newington Gardens and how that money can be used to feed into the programme they are looking at there. And just as I mentioned, the shortfall is £99,000. Just some images of the fountains and another one, podium garden on the bottom. In terms of open space, we mentioned the allocation, talking about 15% of the site being provided as open space. That is met with this particular scheme at 15.9, and the slide here just shows that that's open space provided throughout the scheme. So there would be impacts on neighbours. There was a detailed daylight and sunlight assessment that was done. We had Delva Patman look at that for us. They're here to advise members if there are any questions. So the biggest impacts are on the Scoville estate, just to the north of the site, and there are major adverse impacts on daylight for those properties. Some of the properties receive at the moment very low levels of vertical sky components, which means that a small percentage change can result in a large proportional change on those properties, and that's detailed in the report. Similarly, on sunlight, again, significant impacts, major adverse impacts on residents of the Scoville estates in the main. In terms of overshadowing, again, there are some impacts locally. Most of the publicly accessible open play spaces would not be affected, but there are impacts on gardens and some of the outdoor spaces, again, on the Scoville estate being to the north of the site. The applicants also undertook analysis of the impacts on Mint Street Park following feedback from the community. And the slide here shows that on the 21st of March, the amount of sunlight received by the park would comply with the BRE guidance, a good amount of sunlight in June, but a lower amount of sunlight when the sun is lower in the sky in December. In terms of the traders in Mercato, so the business relocation strategy has had a number of iterations since the application was submitted. Berkeley Homes have engaged further with the traders at Mercato and actually spoken to a large number of the traders individually. This slide just shows the number of employees on the site. In terms of the traders, single traders, there are 12 single traders whose only site is Mercato. 2 have other sites, 1 other site, and the rest have multiple sites elsewhere. So the business relocation strategy is really targeted to those traders for whom this is their only site, or they've only got this and one of the sites. So in terms of the package, Berkeley have committed to funding Tree Shepherd to provide business advice to the traders, and to provide that to the extent of £40,000, a relocation fund of £200,000. So that's been increased since the report was published by just over £60,000. And importantly, a temporary market for 12 traders would be on site. There's a slide I'll come on to in a moment. The units within the temporary markets would be fitted ready to trade, so they would have all of the equipment that a food trader would need to go into that. And importantly, the business relocation strategy and the requirements in the Section 106 would secure continuity of trade. So the existing Mercato would not stop operating until the new temporary market is ready to operate. So the trader could stop operating Mercato one day and start the next day in the new market. Also, existing traders would have the opportunity to go back into Building A. They would have the first right of application on that from the leaseholder of that new, Building C, leaseholder for that new. So the location, the proposed location of the temporary market is where the Institute of Optometry is, and on the right is just an indicative layout of how that market might look. So I mentioned within Building C, there is proposed to be a new food market. And as I mentioned, the existing traders would have the opportunity to apply first for that particular market. I mentioned earlier on the design of mostly buildings A and B to deal with noise from the Ministry of Sound. So a comprehensive assessment was undertaken. There was a joint assessment between the acoustic consultant acting for the applicant, for the Ministry of Sound, and the consultant we employed, RBA, who's Torvin's also here today. So a number of sound was played, a repeating track that the ministry normally use within the ministry itself, and the locations marked as E on that slide show the measurement positions. And in response to that, the acoustic facade design was developed, and that shows that for buildings A and B, for most of the facade, they would need secondary glazing and non-openable windows. Building C and D being further back, road traffic noise is more of an issue, which is sort of informing the acoustic design for that as well. Those measures combined will also deal with the potential agents of change issue with the businesses in the arches, who would affect A and B because they are effectively non-openable windows. Any odour and smells would not affect the residents there. In terms of urban greening, the scheme performs fairly well. It meets the 0.4 urban greening factor. 98 new trees, so the new trees are shown in red, so that would be in the public realm, in the play area, and there would also be biodiversity net gain of 56%. The site would provide carbon savings of 59%. There would be a payment in lieu of just around £100,000, and the intention is to use that particular payment to provide glazing for residents of the Scoville estates, their single glazed homes. Some work is underway to scope that out, but that's the intention, to provide that carbon saving. So, thank you. It's £1 million, not 100,000. I'm going to hand over to Michael on that point.
No, it's green. It's green. Okay, thank you, Dipesh, and thank you, Chair. I'll go through a few of the slides. I'll draw members' attention to paragraphs 412 to 530 in the report, pages 104 to 128, which is a fulsome analysis of the design and heritage impacts. So I'll just give you a brief rundown on that. So when we consider heritage impact of any proposal, we start with the assessment of its visibility, what we call the zone of visual influence. And with tall buildings like this, the zone can be of influence, of visual influence can be far-reaching. So we use accurate visual representations and CGIs and our professional judgment then to understand not only how much of the building is visible, but also how the design affects the viewer's appreciation of the heritage. So views are chosen specifically, like this one here on the right-hand side, which shows the Grade 2 star-listed St George the Martyr church in Borough High Street, with the building in the backdrop on the right-hand side. And officers are then required by the NPPF to assess whether there is harm arising, and if so, to decide on the degree of that harm to the heritage. So the NPPF then guides decision makers to avoid the harm to the heritage, and in the cases of less than substantial harm, where it's identified as less than substantial harm, to consider the heritage harm in the balance against the substantial public benefits arising from the development. Just for the sake of clarity, we've not found any instances where the harm gives rise to substantial harm, or the impact gives rise to substantial harm to the heritage. So what we're reporting to you is that that all these harms that we have identified in the report can be considered in the balance as set out in the report. If we go to the next, in the next slide, you can see these views start to build up a deeper picture, deeper understanding of the development and how it might affect listed buildings. For example, here on the right, we see the Metropolitan Tabernacle on the left and the Farrader Memorial in the middle, and Metro Central Heights on the right. All are Grade 2 star listed buildings, and the development in the backdrop. Where you might see that black outline, that is of a consented development, that the outline of that consented development accurately portrayed. And in fact, on the right-hand side, it is actually the new shopping centre scheme, which is currently under construction. So that dark outline, that black outline that you see there is actually now being constructed fully filled in. So you'd only be able to see just a small portion of the development in this view. So when we looked at this in detail, there were obviously lots of impacts that we needed to look at, but we focused in on the ones of the highest impact and the highest significance. And I'll present these to you so that you can understand the highest priority, if you like, in terms of heritage impacts. First of all, was this protected view, the London View Management Framework view, View 28 from the Serpentine Bridge. This is a view defined by the mayor, where the decision, which is a view designated because it's a very clear view, linear view on axis with the Palace of Westminster World Heritage Site in the distance. There is a protected zone included in this view, which is shown in red in the middle, that red box in the middle, which is the sort of zone which is specifically protected by this view. You can see more, but that area is the highest critical and the area of the World Heritage Site that should be protected. And in this view, the development can be seen over the rooftops in the blue wire line there, off to the left of the protected zone. Our policies require that development should not cause harm to the outstanding universal value of World Heritage Sites. And in this case, the LVMF also includes guidance on the backdrop, or how development should appear in the backdrop of this view. Other tall buildings are visible in the view as well, and the development sits, as I said, outside of the protected zone. So nonetheless, it is, because it is the highest order, the Palace of Westminster World Heritage Site, it is considered that there's a low level of less than substantial harm arising in this view. Members are advised or reminded this is 5 kilometers away from our development. So that's the judgment that arises in terms of the impact. So next, we considered the Trinity Church Square, the impact on the Trinity Church Square. Now, this is one of Southwark's oldest conservation areas, designated conservation areas, and is largely composed of statutory listed Georgian buildings. It's centered on the square itself, with the Grade 2 listed Henry Wood Hall and statue of King Alfred as its focus. So a highly significant and very important set piece, if you like, of the borough's heritage. The views in the views, you can see that this development would be quite prominent in this view. And whilst there are other tall buildings that are visible in and around the square, the development, particularly block B, the tallest tower, would be visible quite a long way around the church and in large parts of the square. So this would introduce a sort of a new feature of the square. In effect, it would be visible from the square all the time. So we're reporting, therefore, that there is harm arising as a consequence of this, and this is at the upper end of the scale of less than substantial harm. We've gone through a number of conservation areas, including our other conservation areas, including this is the King's Bench Conservation Area, where Block A, the shorter of the two towers, would be visible from the conservation area. And here we're saying there's a lower level of less than substantial harm in this view, largely because this is a view straight down the axis of Rushworth Street. The conservation area is on the left, this is the boundary of the conservation area, and to the right is outside the conservation area. We've also looked at West Square. Sorry, that will be further on. So the next area that we looked at was the impact of the development on Southwark Cathedral. This is a view on from London Bridge, where this is a characterful and important view, I think, of Southwark Cathedral, where you view the cathedral and its relationship with the river is important. You can see and clearly recognize the spire of the cathedral and the nave, the silhouette of the nave. What the views demonstrate to us here is that the tall buildings would be visible over the nave of the cathedral for around about 50 meters along the length of London Bridge, and then they would drift across towards the spire, but towards the tower, but they would then disappear behind it as you get closer. So there is again a low scale of less than substantial harm arising as a part of this view. The report includes a detailed assessment of all the affected heritage assets, but none are affected more acutely than these 4 areas that we have highlighted here today. So having recognized the harm arising, decision makers are able to consider the harm in the planning balance. In other words, whether that harm can be justified convincingly by the substantial public benefits arising. Forgive me, this is the West Square view that I was referring to here, and similarly here, the presence of the existing tall buildings in these views is considered to give rise to a low scale of less than substantial harm. In effect, the visibility of these towers will drift in and out as you move around the conservation area. This is obviously the most visible view. But you can see other tall buildings in that view as well. And so the quality of the design in these instances, the quality of the design, the character of the composition, the clear space that is visible around the buildings also helps to limit the harm. And again, we're talking about buildings that are 300 meters away from you in this view, more than 300 meters away from you in this view. Sorry, forgive me. So I'll go back to the public benefits that decision makers can take into consideration, include new public spaces, community facilities, affordable housing, including their associated communal amenities, as well as heritage benefits, like retained and repurposed historic buildings that have been incorporated into the scheme. Heritage benefits, for example, could include the works to locally listed buildings, like the former music school, which is being retained and incorporated into the new community centre on Borough Road. And not just its facade, but a proportion of the internal rooms on 2 floors. So we also need to bear in mind that the site allocation envisaged tall buildings in this location. So there would be a degree of harm that would be, that is identified and recognised in that allocation and in that examination in public when that was considered. So that is the assessment. Am I passing back to Dipesh? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Michael, so in terms of servicing, there would be a basement on site that would deal with all of the servicing needs of the development. 28 blue badge parking spaces are proposed in basements. So just rounding up, in terms of the Section 106 obligations, as I mentioned, 35% of the homes would be affordable, 153 social rent homes and 77 intermediates. There'd be a new community centre, temporary market for traders, including a business relocation fund as part of the business relocation strategy. I should also add at this point that all traders within Mercato would be eligible for that. So there's TAM TV also and Peckham ABC, or a boxing club, who would be eligible to apply for assistance through the business relocation strategy. There'd be a new food hall and public open space, providing play space, water features for the local community and residents. In terms of the planning balance and the benefits. I've talked about affordable housing. There's some detail on the public open space. Connectivity is an important part of the design of the site allocation, not only through the sites, but bringing forward and promoting the low line. There would be an increase in the number of employment spaces and jobs on site. As I mentioned, the new food hall, the carbon savings, the £1 million that would be provided, that would go towards updating and providing double glazing for residents scope estate, and significant seal contributions. So in summary, officers carefully looked at the application and recommend that it is granted subject to conditions referred to the Mayor.
Thank you very much, Wing, Dipesh and Michael for your presentation. So there's a lot of detail there, but I think that was all important, useful information. So thank you for that. Having said that, are there points of clarification that committee members have? Councillor Papula.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for presenting the report. I've got a number of questions, but I am going to first and foremost just focus on in terms of the business relocation plan. It's noted on the addendum that it has been submitted as opposed to earlier. It was insinuated that a new business relocation plan had been submitted, which then takes the notion that there was a business relocation plan already submitted. Could you just clarify, business relocation plan that has been submitted as no addendum, is that the only business relocation plan that has been submitted?
There was an initial business relocation plan submitted, updated business relocation plan then submitted, and then 2 addendums to that. And the one we've mentioned in the addendum committee report is the update on the addendum 2 business relocation strategy 2B, as it's called, and that includes the mentioned. And
yeah, I think the first one was June last year. Is that right?
Thank you for that clarification. First and foremost, I would like to ask what discussions officers have had with the applicant with regards to the amount, as noted in the in terms of the bid. It's quite helpful that the amount's been increased, but from a layperson's point of view, it would be fantastic to know first and foremost what that actually does, because £200,000 does seem like a significant amount, but there are a number of traders. They have a variety of wants, and it doesn't come across as if the £200,000 is the amount to help these traders during that period. So a point of clarification would be.
yeah, so we've continued to discuss the business relocation strategy with the applicant on this. I think the increase in the amount has been done twice, so it went up to from about 100k to 137, then more recently to £200,000. So, but alongside that, and I think this is important, that's just one element of the whole package in terms of the business relocation. So for 12 traders, because the temporary markets and the business relocation for some traders will be moved somewhere else on site, continue to trade, and then have the opportunity to go back. So for those traders, they might not need access to any funds because of the ready to go fit out of the temporary market. So that will theoretically deal with 12, so the number comes down. And of the remaining traders, 5 of them have more than 10 sites, so perhaps they wouldn't need as much support. I think business relocation strategy, that the final relocation strategy will need to be secured through the 106. So a more detailed one would need to be submitted. But in terms of that £200,000, that's probably that will be shared between fewer traders than all of the ones that operate for the reason.
Further question you have?
Yes, if that's all right, Chair, it'll be my last question with regards to this one specifically. It's also been noted that businesses would have the opportunity to apply to come back. Now, to my knowledge and understanding, small businesses under a business relocation plan do have the right to come back rather than quote unquote opportunity. Is that just a miswording noted in your presentation, or could you confirm if there is a right for these businesses to return, of course, liaising with the applicant in terms of the fit out that they may need to go back and to try?
I think for the new food markets itself, the applicant would provide that to an operator, and that operator would need to agree terms with any traders that go in. And feedback from the applicant is that they would have the first right of application for those. So there wouldn't be an absolute right to return. They would still need to agree those commercial terms, but the applicant will be able to answer maybe a bit more fully than I can.
Sounds like a fruitful area to quiz the applicant on later. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the dwelling sizes. So I'm referring in particular to page 105 of our papers and page 62 of the report on this application. Looking at the proposed sizes in the table just beneath paragraph 253, the only place that we're getting close to the minimum size requirement is on the 1B2, where you've got 50 to 83. Are there any dwellings on the proposal that are beneath the minimum size requirement at all?
No, there are not.
Okay, very helpful, thank you. If I may, Chair, second question, thank you. And the other question I had was around impact on views and heritage, and in particular with regard to Trinity Church Square. In paragraph 442, so page 154 of our papers, 111 of the report, and you made reference to it in your presentation as well, that the impact here was at the upper end of less than substantial harm. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that particular assessment is come to, so that I can have a better understanding of how that was arrived at? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned, there is some visibility of other tall buildings in the area from within Trinity Church Square. When you stand in this location, when you move around the square, you get views of the Shard, for example, or you get views of 251, Eileen House. I call it Eileen House as well, from various different angles. These are limited views. When you move 5 or 10 meters further along, it drifts up. Those drift out of view, and others come into view. It's normal that in an urban conservation area, you would get some visibility of the city in around it. So that we're not saying that that is is harmful per se. Where we've landed on the level of harm here, and it was recognised as well by Historic England, and that is the taller of the two towers. We did a sort of dynamic assessment of where the taller of the two towers would be visible, and given its proximity with the conservation area, being closest and on Newington Causeway, it became apparent that you would see it not only from this point, but if you were to walk down the left-hand side and round, and then also back up along the right hand side of the churchyard. See, if you cross the pavement and you were right under the Georgian, right close up to the Georgian properties, it wouldn't be visible anymore, but you would see it even on the pavement on the right hand side of the church. So a full round of the church, a walk around, would mean that it would still stay within that view, within your view. Obviously, this is a conservation area that has other parts. There's Merrow Square further along and other parts of the conservation area. But I think this is obviously the centerpiece, the important part, a highly significant part of the conservation area. So that's why we landed that the harm is not just middle of the order of less than substantial harm. It is pushing towards the upper level of less than substantial harm, and that's the professional judgment we've come at. Basically, what we're saying is because this will be a permanent fixture, if you like, a permanent new fixture, if you like, of the conservation area. That gives that rise to that level, to that sort of judgment of harm.
So the professional judgment is based on a comparison of your experience, your team's experience with other applications and other impacts on these kind of views for other applications, basically.
Indeed,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And the landscape visual impact assessment, that is that provides accurate visualizations of these proposals in the round.
Thank you.
I'm about to bring Councillor Johnson in, but just whilst we're on here. So I think this is a really important aspect of this. So this is Trinity Church Square, and on the right hand of those panels, this is kind of almost not quite a fisheye, is it? But it's sort of three sequential photos. So on the right hand one, you have got sort of pretty much in near the sort of tallest element, and to the right of that is the development we're considering today. And am I right saying that the building, though, to the left of the taller tower is Eileen House, which is already there, just so that people understand that. So, yeah.
Yes,
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I had two questions as well, actually, unrelated. The first one regards the temporary market, which I understand has got space for 12 traders. Do we know what criteria will be used to select those 12 traders?
So priority will be given to sole traders currently Mercato, and then it will cascade up to those traders who have one other site and then larger site. So the traders at the top of the table at the bottom, they would be given priority, and then that would go down that route.
My second question is regarding the unit mix across the development. It seems relatively light on what I would call family-sized dwellings. If my mental maths is correct, 13.2% are 3B, 4P or higher. I wondered how that compared to the council's own statistics, which I assume we have, around what demand is by size of property in the north of the borough. Are that match, or is it under or over?
Pulling in here.
Yeah, in terms of our priority housing waiting list, it's a fairly balanced 1, 2, 3 bed demand. For 4 beds above, demand is somewhat less, but actually providing those is more difficult. What the report sets out is that what we prioritised is 3 and 4 beds in social rents. So the lower proportion of larger units is in the private. Of course, we can't compel families to buy family housing in private sale, but we allocate into affordable housing. So we can at least guarantee that by prioritising the large units and social rents, that we can take families off the housing waiting list and put them into the new social rent loans.
And on the social housing side, how do those numbers compare to as a percentage say on the waiting list should be?
In terms of proportionate demand from the housing waiting list for 1, 2, 3, and 4 beds.
Yeah, so if we were to turn the number of social rented properties above bed people compared to what we know the demands residents.
I think in terms of the 4 beds, that would not match the demands. In terms of the 1, 2, and 3, I think that's pretty close.
Thank you. I'm going to take Councillor Whittam.
Thank you, Chair. I think 3 questions. Start with 1. Yeah, okay, 1 second.
Thank you. Yeah, if committee members could bring their microphones slightly closer to them.
Okay, I'm very concerned about the amount of single aspect dwellings, and it's very difficult to tell on the map, on the plans, which way's north, to see how many of them are single aspect or enhanced single aspect. I don't believe in such a thing. North facing unit.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. So the slide there shows the image on the right shows the housing blocks and north being up.
Yeah, where is north then?
At the top of the slide.
It's not always on the top.
It is on this here where we've taken the blocks themselves. North is not at the top, but there is on the bottom right an indication of the orientation of, in this case, block C.
Are you saying there are no
North-facing dwellings now.
believe you? Can I start with my second question?
You may.
The second question is about light. Looking at the page 179, paragraph 786, starting with McCoyd Way, there are proposed losses of 100% light for those dwellings. What does that mean?
Thank you for the question. Yes, there would be some losses that are deemed to be adverse, and I think the 100% light that you're referring to is in relation to sunlight as a light. And there would be limited instances where winter sunlight is reduced to 0%. So just in context, the recommendations are for 25% sunlight to be achieved over the course of a year, with 5% of those hours being in the winter. In relation to, I'm just looking at one now on my screen, for example, at number 4, McCoyd Way, in the existing condition, the winter sunlight would be 4%, and that would reduce to 0%. However, the annual overall for this window would be 15%, which granted is below the 25% recommendation. However, if we think about retained values and acceptability of alternative target values, generally speaking, 15% could be considered acceptable in a more urban location where sunlight could be more restricted. It's also important to note in relation to this neighbour, the layouts are unknown. So all rooms and windows have been tested for sunlight, and it could be that that window relates to a bedroom, for example, where sunlight is generally seen as less important than, say, a main living room.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam.
So, just in layman's terms, would 15% equate to having your lights on? Would you have to have your lights on if your total value of sunlight was 15%?
So 15% is the amount of sunlight over the course of the year of the available hours. 25% is generally seen as the recommendation. However, that could be seen as more in line with a more suburban area. In London, in more built-up areas, that level of sunlight can be difficult to achieve for various reasons that might be existing obstructions. For example, on the Scoville estate, there are existing elements that do somewhat restrict the daylight and sunlight to not all of the windows and rooms within properties, but certainly some, with projecting wings and boundary walls and such that do restrict daylight and sunlight. So in some instances, those low levels of existing daylight and sunlight, any meaningful matting that comes forward on the site could lead to somewhat a bigger reduction there, or reduction in the available sunlight.
So I think in terms of sunlight, I think your question, Councillor Wilson, was about whether someone would need to put the light on. So I think daylight is perhaps the more appropriate metric to look at there. And for that particular property on McCoyd Way, the windows following the development, if it were to happen, would have between 22% and 9.8% VSC, which is still a fairly good level of daylight hitting a window in central London.
Have we got that table?
I've got it on my screen. It's on the website. It's the applicant's daylight sunlight assessment.
Okay, it would be useful to have had that in the report, I think. But thank you, Councillor Papula.
Cheers, Chair. I've got a further additional question to Councillor Johnson's question with regards to the lack of family size. So, of course, in your response, it was made quite clear that in proportion, if we solely focus on the social rented home, a good proportion of them are family size. But I'm very much aware that we look at the scheme as a whole, and in the scheme as a whole, the policy, I believe P2 of the public plan speaks about 20%. Yeah, from what I've calculated, and as Councillor Johnson has noted, 13.2. So my question to officers is, in the entirety, why was that deemed acceptable?
That sounds like one for Colin.
Yeah. So it's looking at prioritising that family thing to people who have families who could, overcrowded accommodation, temporary accommodation, and meeting that need. Yes, there is a general policy provision about 20%, and this doesn't meet that policy provision. But as officers, we're saying if you take that into consideration with everything else that we're taking into things touched on earlier, the viability scheme, that it does meet the 60% 2-bed and above. That's over the entire scheme, so that it's about 60.1. But that in order to maximise where we think the most benefit would come, 3 and 4 beds, our recommendation to you is that where the applicants got to, putting those in social rents gives the best social outcome and delivers what the Southwark plan is prioritising, which is affordable housing, a selection of affordable housing, including family housing. It does not meet the absolute letter of every policy, as on, including that provision of 20% 3-bed and above. But I think what it does do, and I think where it shows you that mix, it will meet a genuine need. And certainly the conversations with the developer were about providing 4 beds, which have been included. Pretty proportionately, you might argue that there could be more, but we genuinely feel that that the developer has acknowledged that, and they have become part of the scheme. And we think that would deliver the greatest public benefit.
And just by my quick maths, about 35% of social housing, 3 or 4 beds. So if you're looking at the social housing, family size homes. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah. So just to clarify, this scheme fails to meet a critical element of our local public plan, but on balance and look at the wider scheme and project, we feel that on the balance, even though it falls far short of what is noted in the plan, we'll think that it's acceptable.
I think if it didn't meet 60% of 2 beds and above, and if it was only providing 5% of 3 beds and above, then we'd be making a different recommendation. But because it's 60% 2 beds and above, and because it's 13% of 3 and 4 beds, and they are all concentrated where we think they would deliver the intent of the plan in terms of that public benefit and affordable housing for all, that's why we're making the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to briefly go back to the daylight impact issue. And of course, it's almost impossible to build anything in central London without having an impact on somebody. It does seem, however, to have had a major impact on a small number of properties. I don't know if this has ever been done before as a condition, or even if it's legal. Has anyone ever suggested any form of compensation for individuals who have had very major negative impacts because a property's been built by them, but on balance, the decision was we need to build it anyway? I take one for the team.
Oh yeah, bring officers in on that, because I know there has been some thinking around that in general, but Colin.
The Section 106 provision allows a mitigation of harms. So as long as those mitigations are fairly and reasonably related to a planning purpose, and also reasonably related to the scheme and the scale of the scheme. So those Section 106 requirements mean that you can't lawfully directly compensate for something like loss of light. But the suggestion in the report, which is to direct the carbon offset fund to something which would be beneficial to Scope estate residents, which is the replacement of their single glazing with double glazing. It will not rectify the loss of light issue, so it won't directly compensate for that. But it is a mitigatory measure that we're proposing. In the report, it makes clear that it's not going to improve daylight sunlight, but it is a legitimate mitigating contribution that could be made to the estate.
Thank you. Councillor Papula, you indicated again, and then Councillor.
Yes, Chair, apologies. 2 questions. One, going back to housing, and another in terms of the commercial unit. So the first question is that it'll be good to get clarification if the private section of the development is being built first, and then subsequently the intermediate and social housing. If that is if if that is the layout, may I ask why that is the case? Only because I'm aware, Chair, that the application is the application is the application, but there has been historic instances in which developers have used that model and subsequently they've reneged. So it would be fantastic if there could be a slight change to ensure that the majority of social or intermediate housing is built first, or a certain amount is built first before the private properties are either built or slash sold. So that's my first question, and then I'll ask my next one.
Yes, so within the report, we identify a mechanism for addressing that point. So the developer can't sell more than 54% of the private until all the affordable has been completed. So it's to address that point, and as you say, it's happened before. I can think of an example in Canada Water where that happened. So this legal agreement incentivizes the developer to basically build out the affordable housing, because otherwise there is a limit to what they can sell on the site. In terms of timing, there will be the construction of private sale with the affordable, because there needs to be a cash flowing of the whole scheme. But this ensures that you don't just end up with the private, as has happened, fortunately, very occasionally before, and then it just stops, and then the second phase never gets built.
And just to clarify that before I turn to Councillor Whittam, this is a development where we have a housing association on board, and we are certain that the nature of that agreement would, this is a question rather than a statement, but we are certain, aren't we, that that the nature of that agreement would not fall foul part of the way through the process, as perhaps happened in other sites. So it's that certainty of delivery with the housing association that we have agreed on this site.
I mean, certainly, Berkeley Homes have a close relationship with some housing associations, in particular with Peabody. I think at the moment, because of the nature of funding for housing associations, it's very difficult for them to commit to a scheme prior to planning permission being granted. But I think probably the applicants team can say a bit more about where they've got to with that, and how they would expect that to develop post the decision.
Thank you. I am going to turn to. Sorry, is there a related question? Right, Councillor Fuller, if it's a brief related question.
I did say two questions, Chair, but I appreciate it. Could I quickly ask, with regards to the affordable workspaces now? I know that that's being substituted. That's being substituted with community space. You know, fine. I hear that completely. But one thing that did slightly alarm me was the fact that a community space is being built, but it will occupy less space. But it is of high spec. Could you just clarify? Is that usual? Because I've personally not heard of a substitution in terms of no affordable workspace. There being less community space, but the acceptability, or because it is a high spec piece of space that it is deemed acceptable. Could you please speak to that?
At present, the site, most of the community use is actually in 82 and 83 Borough Road. 82 Borough Road is currently vacant, but that's not open to public. So what the proposal does is provide a new community space that's going to be accessible and provision for the local community and for residents. It is going to be a much better quality and also be more inclusive and have the meeting some of the accessibility guidances. So in that terms, it is a much better quality. It is going to be first offered to the Latin American cultural community, and which is one of the corporate plan's objectives, our commitment to provide a space for the Latin cultural community. And in terms of affordable workspace, given that there's a significant deficit, the scheme already, we've had to take that balanced view of where we are prioritising that the traders go back into building C. So the workspace itself is actually only in building E. So building A and B are likely to be occupied by retail and restaurant tenants. Building C and D are likely to be the sui generis use, which is the food hall operator. So workspace itself is just a building E, which is 82 Borough Road. There is a part in policy P31 which says that there could be exceptional circumstances where there's an affordable cultural use or affordable space for a named occupier that meets a need, then that space can then take place of affordable workspace. So at this, it's being leased at Peppercorn Rent at 82 Borough Road, building E, and that Peppercorn Rent would be at significantly more affordable than what an affordable workspace at discount without market rent. So we've taken that view that in this instance it triggers that exceptional circumstances in P31.
Yeah, sure.
You've noted P31 if there's a named operator, but from what I've seen and heard, there is no named operator. You stated that it is for that the aim is for it to be offered to the Latin American community, but that doesn't explicitly state that they're the named operator. So, to my understanding, P31 wouldn't then apply. So, therefore, the exemption aspect would then not apply in this matter.
The kind of discussion with the Latin American community is ongoing. So that's trying to see if they can basically put together a business case, if you like, for running the space, and also create an entity which can be identified as the people who take the lease on. So we haven't managed to do that yet, but that's kind of an ongoing kind of aspiration. But should that not come forward, as Wing said, then the space would be offered to other community users. And in terms of the comparison of the totality of the space, the existing community space is the Old Baptist Chapel. There's a ground floor space, which is basically a large empty room, and then there's an upper space where they used to have the actual chapel, but all the fittings that you would associate with Victorian chapel have all been taken out. The services, the toilets, the heating hasn't been occupied, I think, for 5 years now. There is a bathtub in the basement where they used to baptise people in, but beyond that, there aren't any particularly redeeming features on the interior. So the quality issue is that is a larger space, but the space that would be created would have heating, cooling, toilet facilities, lighting, all done to a reasonably high specification. And the critical thing is it's a Peppercorn Rent that's being offered at, and that will either be to the Latin community or to another community user. That's the kind of thing that is probably going to be negotiated on post planning, should the recommendation be agreed.
Councillor Whittam.
Just coming on to the agent of change and the sound aspect. Looking at the diagrams on page 40, it seems like some people are getting much more protection than others. So the ones with the red section facing the nothing in between get maximum protection, but some of the others don't get as good protection. Now, I don't think sound travels just in a straight line. It will go round buildings. Can you explain those diagrams to it?
Sure. So just for clarification, the colour coding on those represents the sound insulation treatment, not the noise levels inside the properties. And I think you got that, but I'm just making clear. So it's not they're worse affected. So the closer the properties are to the Ministry of Sound, and in particular the roof of the Ministry of Sound, which is where, the closer the properties are to the roof of the Ministry, which is where the majority of the sound breaks out, the higher the noise levels are that hit the building facade. And modelling has been done separately by 3 different acousticians who've come up with more or less the same answers, in that the closest facades are the worst affected. And as you go further back, the noise levels do reduce. As you'd expect, as you get further away from anything, it becomes quieter. And so the acoustic treatment of that facade can be reduced. And of course, when you're on the back side of the building and you're shielded by the building from the Ministry itself, then you're afforded an awful lot more protection from that sound. So I'm comfortable that the modelling represents the worst case and the real life situation. And what we will probably find is that there's probably a band of those properties at maybe levels 4, 5, and 6 that have the most noise on them. But because the facade treatment is equal all the way up to make it look visually the same, actually the properties who are that further bit away from the roof are more comfortably inside the noise targets. That help?
It does, except that we're very aware that sound travels within the medium of the air. And if the wind is blowing in a different direction, then the modelling surely will show something different. So shouldn't everybody get equal protection no matter which way the wind blows?
Yes. There's 3 parts to that. So firstly, the model assumes that wind is blowing towards you. So it takes that worst case assumption in the first instance. So if the wind is going the other way, actually the levels will be lower. The second part is where you don't need to have the highest performance glazing. It's not a sustainable environmentally solution to go over the top with your glazing specification. So it just makes sense to reduce that requirement. And thirdly, those worst case blocks A and B, have to have winter gardens because of the high noise levels, whereas the lower specification, where there are lower noise levels, then external, more traditional balconies become possible. And so accessing onto those, you can't do that with a secondary glazed solution. So in theory, you could apply that red treatment everywhere and it would be brilliant. But there's no need. And actually it brings more issues than it solves.
Okay. I'm not seeing any indications from other members. So I've got a few questions I wanted to go through. So first of all, one of the things that wasn't covered was the issue, a fairly fundamental one, about the site allocation. So in our policy, we've identified there ought to be a minimum of 438 homes. This is obviously considerably greater than that. So just to talk through that aspect, because obviously I think that is a fairly just talk on that matter.
So as Wing mentioned in the initial presentation, the site allocation identifies a minimum number of homes. We're in region 750. The inspector then required a modification to the plan. So rather than saying that the indicative number of homes on the site was 430 or so, that was changed to say that would be a minimum number. And that was on the basis of that discussion with ourselves, with local residents, and also with Berkeley Homes, who presentations at that time. And the inspector's view broadly was, well, if that was the minimum, then that would allow us at least to get closer to meeting the housing targets, which are handed down from the London Plan. But how far you could go above that minimum would depend on how it met other plan policies. So the report is essentially, and the presentation from officers has essentially been about the extent to which it meets those other plan policies. It doesn't meet all of those other plan policies, but one of the significant benefits it does bring is, as we've discussed, the affordable housing delivery. Another thing to bear in mind is that Southwark Plan 2022 is up for review, and as you would be aware, the current government is focused on increasing housing, and we know that by applying what's known as the standard methodology for assessing housing requirements in boroughs, the number of homes that were required to try and deliver in Southwark is going to go up. It's going to go up from about 2,330 a year, probably about 2,850 a year, and it's quite challenging to meet that number. It's quite challenging to meet the current number. So absolutely, it is a minimum, but there was an opportunity at the IP for the inspector to say, well, I think that should be the indicative capacity. That does apply on some of the site allocations, but on many of the site allocations, it's just expressed as a minimum, and that's to avoid a kind of like an underdevelopment of the site. As officers, we're recommending that that whilst this is twice as much as that minimum for the reasons in the report, we still think that the scheme would be acceptable.
Thank you. I think that possibly leads me on to my next question, which is, we've clearly heard in the presentation that this application is compliant with policy on the level of both affordable housing and social housing. But I do know that a number of objections were making the case there ought to be more affordable housing, more social housing. So I wondered whether somebody could talk us through about the viability assessment here. And that seems to talk to your point about why perhaps the development is so large. So yeah, if you could talk us through about the viability, that'd be very helpful.
Yes, so on all planning applications, to be aware, we undertake our own viability assessment. So we have our own surveyor looking at the viability, and there was, and this is in paragraph 221 of the main report, BPS undertook that work for us. BPS have concluded that the scheme would be in deficit. Their conclusion is it wouldn't be as big a deficit as Berkeley Homes were maintaining, but nonetheless, at 35% affordable housing, there would still be a deficit in the scheme. The reason for that deficit is essentially a function of the inflation, build costs, which have inflated by about 40% over the last 3 or 4 years. And at the same time, that there hasn't been inflation in sales values of flatted accommodation in central London. So adjusted for inflation, that hasn't actually increased for the last 10 years. So you've had an upward build cost inflation, no increase in private sale. We're still trying to cross-subsidise the affordable housing. And that's why it's been very difficult to make housing schemes work on the Section 106 cross-subsidy model. In the future, there might be changes to that in other schemes, but that would depend on the amount of subsidy for affordable housing nationally and in London increasing. There has been an announcement yesterday about the overall affordable housing programme increasing by £2 billion, but it's going to take some time for that to kind of work through the system. So this scheme has been assessed against what is available currently in terms of supporting affordable housing. And our conclusion, independent conclusion, is that at 35%, it would still be in deficit. The applicant has confirmed that they feel, given the Zone 1 location, proximity to tube stations, they feel that they can still, in a longer term, make this work, which is why they're still committed to 35%. Be it viability shows that doesn't quite work at the moment.
And just to clarify that bit, so in law, as I understand it, the way viability is calculated is not about a sort of straightforward profit or loss. There is an allowance for a percentage profit within that. So, because obviously no developer would build a development that a private developer, although rarely would. So we anticipate there would be some profit at this level, but it would be lower than it would be if they were hitting that viability threshold. Is that a fair assessment? And do we know roughly what the quantum that would be?
Yes. So the seen profit in this scheme from our own assessor is 18.8%, so just shy of 19%. But that's probably a kind of an average profit level that a private housing developer would be looking at. And on that basis, this scheme would make a profit. So that's a £52 million profit. But that would be short of the profit it would need to make to get to 19%. And the reason for that 19% profit is because of the risk of undertaking a very large development. So if you drop that profit to a lower level, and if things don't go right in your developments, and if it takes you longer to complete, and if your sales are slower, you end up making an absolute loss. So again, our professional advice, and this isn't a legal point, so there isn't a law of 19%, but the professional advice from our own valuation surveyor is that the assumption of a nearly 19% profit is a reasonable assumption to make in assessing whether or not this scheme is viable. So yes, it would make a profit, but not enough of a profit to be considered a scheme.
And if I understand the figures in paragraph 2 to 1, that's basically saying that if it was operating at level of what they're permitted to within the viability assessment, their profit would be about 3 times as much as we are calculating their profit is likely on these figures. Is that right?
Yes, it would be somewhere in the region of about 170 million, 75 million. I mean, it's, when you're building housing schemes in central London, they come at quite a risk. And I would say the council's own experience of its own council housing programme is at times it can be quite challenging. And you can't always predict price increases, issues with contractors, what you find on site, whether or not you can sell the homes that you built for sale.
Thank you. I wanted to very quickly turn to slide 26. I think we talked about the separation of buildings just to understand where the windows were on. There's maybe it's not slide 26. It's the one that showed the separation between buildings. It was that's the one. Sorry, yeah, 25. So there's a 9-metre gap between buildings C and D. So just really, because it's not clear from that image where the windows are. So just to understand, I think you said there wouldn't be any overlooking there, but just clarify where the windows are on that view.
In the report, it does say that those windows would have oblique views into Diary House, and Diary House is a commercial property. And on that podium,
Sorry, it wasn't the Diary House, which is the building that's being retained. It was between
that's
C
north.
and D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those windows on the first and second floor of Building C would have those views into Diary House, because Diary House is only something like 5 stories, or 9 meters. Okay, sorry, I thought you meant the 9 meters to Diary House. I think I've said in the report that those windows those units would be would have dual aspect, and they would have views out onto the podium and to Newington Causeway. So there are other windows that are available to those units, and those instances are very low. It doesn't happen on every floor.
And final question from me, just to return to the issue about the impacts on Scobell Estate on daylight and sunlight. So my understanding of the diagrams that we have is that the biggest impact on Scobell Estate is coming from building D rather than building A or B or C. Is that a fair assumption? So actually from the sort of 18-story element rather than the very tall blocks which are closer to railway lines. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say so, and that's simply because of the proximity of that block to the estate. But yeah.
Thank you. Any final questions from committee members? Thank you. That was quite a lengthy session of questions, but I do think that was very thorough and very important that we did that. I'm now going to turn to representations. Councillor Whittam.
Can we have a
I was going to propose it after the objectors. Are people happy to wait a little bit longer? All right. Okay. We were going to have a 5-minute break now. I can see rebellion in the ranks. So we'll take a 5-minute comfort break and we will return at 8:32. and we will restart the meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody for turning so promptly. What I'm going to ask is whether there is, I can see somebody who's already come forward, but I would like to ask whether there's anyone in the meeting that'd like to come forward to talk in objection to the application. Just to repeat, this meeting is being live streamed, and a recording will be available on the council's YouTube channel. So when introducing yourself, please only give your first name and an idea about what block or street you live in, rather than giving your full address. So that, as I said previously, please don't say anything here that you wouldn't want to be public knowledge, as we do. So, yes, so I'd like you to introduce yourself. So if you, as you say, if you tell us who you are and where you live, and once you've done that, I will give you 3 minutes to address the meeting.
My name is Nina Wessel, and I live by Min Street Park.
Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes.
Chair, councillors, I'm here today to express our grave concerns about this development. We do not believe that the views and needs of the community have been properly reflected in the committee report, and we urge the committee to reject this application as the harms outweigh any purported benefits. The report praises the contribution to the skyline. The subjective opinion contradicts both the assessments of heritage authorities and the environmental statement, which conclude that the development will have significant and harmful impact on the local historic environment and in respect of overshadowing. These conclusions align with the majority of the 600-some objections to this development that express concern about the excessive heights of the buildings and the overshadowing, which will affect schools, playgrounds, parks, and hundreds of homes, the most affected being Scoville Estate. The report admits major adverse effects, 100% loss of winter sun for some residents. This isn't just a loss of light. It is a social issue affecting an estate with vulnerable residents, including the Queensborough Community Centre, Playground, and Age Concern Centre, all missed as sensitive receptors on the developer's own studies. Heritage authorities and the design review panel of GLA are pleading for the protected buildings and views around the site not to be destroyed. And to show the council's inconsistency, residents in Trinity Square for the last 30 years have not been allowed even to put up an antenna on the roofs because of the harm caused to the protected view. The report dismisses Mercato as a meanwhile space, but over the last 9 years, this market has become the heart of our community. It now attracts over 600,000 yearly visitors, provides safe and inclusive spaces, and offers activities for children and adults alike. The traders provide jobs, support families, and sustain the local economy. This isn't just a market, it's a key reason people want to live here. The report wrongly states in point 1037 that the traders not among the 12 offered relocation were planning to move or close anyway, and this is simply not true. In the last minute, thanks to pressure by us, an increase in the relocation fund was offered. It is now 200,000, and to put that into perspective, Berkeley is offering 78,000 for a new bus shed. We understand that the applicant now again claims that all the traders are happy. Many traders are still afraid to speak up for fear of losing out in this relocation lottery. Each site can only be developed once. Once done, it cannot be undone. We accept we need housing, but the development needs to protect the existing community. And in this case, the public cost is too high. This isn't just about policy breaches, it's about the erosion of our community, the very fabric that binds us together. For questions, we have representatives here today from the traders and from Scoville Estate and conservationists. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your representation and to that. Members of committee, do we have the objector? Councillor Pula.
Thank you for taking the time to come here to speak to the committee. I do have two quick questions. The first one is, first and foremost, what is an acceptable height? If so, say for example, they put forward a scheme, what would be a height for you? But also, you've also mentioned that the traders are a real hub of the community. Could you speak to me more, or maybe a trader that you noted that has come here could also speak about their experience liaison with regards to the consultation with Berkeley Homes, just so that the committee are aware of what a trader has possibly gone through and experienced, so that we can see that into our final topic.
Juliet, would you mind quickly speaking about the preferred height for the shadows, and then after Laura, you can speak on for the traders.
Hello, I'm Juliet. Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Juliet. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Scoville Estate. I am a resident of Scoville Estate. So as we've talked about, the right to light is a material planning consideration, and the developer's own assessments reveal daylight and sunlight impacts far exceeding established guidelines, creating a significant and unacceptable loss of amenity for existing residents, mostly the elderly, families on low income and children. This isn't just the loss of light, it's a social issue affecting an estate with vulnerable residents. So the developer and GIA responsible for the study have missed crucial sensitive receptors on their report. The playground, Queensborough Community Centre, and Age Concern headquarters, with their historic facility and communal garden, all three important daytime hubs for this estate, will be majorly affected by being largely overshadowed for hours of the day during the winter months, and more importantly in the spring, the time when most people during the day are leaving their children at the playground and at the community centre, and elderly residents are being brought to Age Concern for those important daylight hours. So moving forward to speak about what we could propose. The schools and their playgrounds are particularly sensitive to daylight and sunlight impacts. So these contents are relevant as material planning considerations in their own right, and also when considering the equalities impacts under the public sector equality duty. The fact that the application massively exceeds the site allocation, greatly exacerbating daylight and sunlight impacts, should need to be very seriously borne in mind. We have actually, because Berkeley apparently has shown an overshadowing map to planners. We've asked for this several times. We've been shown it, but we've never received it. We had our own overshadowing map created by a 3D designer. And it was quite extraordinary seeing, and obviously we weren't allowed to present it here at such short notice, but it was quite extraordinary seeing how significantly affected the shadow is over the conservation areas, and particularly these areas in the Scoville Estate, which are really vulnerable areas. We also then had a map made of a 20% reduction in height of the towers. And although it still creates a huge amount of loss of winter light, it significantly changes the spring metrics. So spring equinox just misses these areas that are sensitive in the Scoville Estate. It still catches a little edge of the estate, but it's a lot better. So a 20% reduction in height would be about, I think, 102 meters of the middle tower. Please don't quote me. I leave that for you to do the math. But that would be a beginning. It's about 10 stories from the middle tower around the tower. That literally is the only thing that changes anything significantly in Scoville Estate.
Thank you for that. That's helpful to hear your perspective. You met. There was also a question that Councillor Fuller asked about traders.
Yeah, can I call Laura? Do you want to come up?
Hi, my name is Laura. I'm one of the traders at the Mercado Metropolitano. We've been having a lot of meetings. We've been having a lot of meetings with Berkeley, and even if we don't have the final details yet, in the final meeting that we have only a couple of weeks ago, we're all happy with the idea of what they're proposing, but we don't have the details. We don't know who is going to run the alternative building, how is going to be selected, the 12 traders. Even if there is a space for the 12 traders, it seems not to be enough seating. So there is no point of having a lot of traders if there is not enough people that we can serve. So we are happy with the idea, but we need details. And the details have not been provided yet. I suppose it will go later on. Yeah, it would be good to know more details.
Really helpful, thank you. And that will certainly pose us some questions for later. I'm going to take Councillor Johnson. Sorry, I'm going to take Councillor Edwards, who was next, then Councillor Johnson, Councillor Whitton.
Thank you from me as well for coming along and speaking tonight. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things that you said. The first is a more general question. In what you've said in those 3 minutes, you described some of the negative aspects of the scheme, some of which are covered in the report that we've got before us. You didn't mention any of the positive aspects of the scheme, some of the contributions that it would make to society here in this particular area where the application is taking place, including and perhaps in particular the additional affordable and social rent housing that people need and that people are in desperate need of. Do you recognise that there is a balance to be struck between some of the negative impacts which are recognised and also the positives from the scheme as well?
Yes, we recognise that. I mean, can I call on Victor to ask that? Is that possible? Because Victor will be talking about the housing issues in his presentation.
Yeah, we'll be taking ward councillors later in the meeting, so we will hear from them. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah. Okay. And you said in your presentation that some of the traders are afraid of speaking up. Could you tell me a little bit more about the information and evidence that you've got for that and why that is?
One is because I've been working that closely with the Mercator for probably 6 months, and when I'm asking traders, why aren't you objecting? They say, we don't want to get in trouble. That is the quote. And they are afraid to lose out in this relocation lottery because, of course, you want to be among the 12. That's one thing. And to make sure that you get the money. But my thoughts here. So what happened, for instance, we had this meeting that Laura referred to a couple of weeks ago. There were quite few, I would say there were like maybe 10, 12 traders present, which is not such a big part of the market, maybe like a third. Hardly anyone spoke because they're afraid to speak. And they come up to me after and say, we don't like this, but I'm afraid to speak because my English is bad, or because these are mostly minority traders and they don't feel that confident. Okay, English is their second language. They might be quite recently arrived in the UK and they are not confident speaking in public, and they are afraid to cause trouble. That has literally been the quote. We don't want to get in trouble. Many people have told me that.
Thank you. One last one.
Sorry. It was actually a follow-up for Laura, who spoke earlier. Is that okay, Chair, if I follow up?
Yes, sure. Laura, is it possible if you come forward?
Laura.
Sorry to bring you forward again.
Larry, you said that you're happy with the idea of what is being proposed, but you want the detail, which is obviously an understandable thing to want. Have you been given any promises or undertakings that you would eventually be getting that detail? I can understand why you're keen for it, but have you been told that that's going to be forthcoming?
They couldn't give us any details yet because it will depend who is going to be running the space, and then they only give a first draft of a possibility of how the building is going to be running. And in that meeting, we all asked, like, in this first draft, there is only like 100, 120 seats for 12 traders. We cannot just fit 10 people a day per sitting. So we asked if it will be a possibility to go higher instead of 2 floors, maybe 3 floors. I know there is a basement in the building in the optometry because no one has mentioned that this is going to be by the three building sites, and they said they're going to be looking into it. But we don't have. It was like a first draft, a first meeting. So that's what we're saying. We like the idea, but we don't know.
Really helpful. Yeah, it's about that. Hope to get a bit more information. So that's really helpful. Thank you for raising that. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming along tonight. I had a question about the consultation process. I noticed in the report that one of the concerns about the consultation process was a belief that concerns of residents and local businesses did not have a measurable impact on the design. I wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit more and just talk through how residents and local traders have experienced the consultation process. What was it like?
Can you repeat again? I didn't get that.
For both of you, I guess, what was the consultation process like? I noticed there was a comment in the reports that some residents at least felt that although there was a consultation, residents' concerns were not then reflected in any changes to the application. So I just wanted to explore that in a little more detail to understand what the consultation process was like from your side.
Consultation process for Scoville has been pretty insulting. I think a lot of the Scoville residents feel just that they have absolutely no voice. And the estate is a largely happy estate, despite the fact that it's been waiting for quite a long time for some major works to give it some double glazing and repair the sewage system, which is particularly bad on the estate. So there's that's another concern, I think, that we're already very overrun with a massive sewage issue that isn't being solved. So there have been promises. Some residents have come to me saying, "Oh, I've just been promised that Berkeley are going to give me double glazing." And then another resident will say, "But you do understand that your windows literally will just be the towers of the blocks, and most of the daylight will be gone." And then they sort of give up again and go home. So I think that there's been a real systemic misleading of information. A Berkeley representative turned up at my house and offered me planting, sort of in return for the loss of light. And the plants that they were offering, it just felt very insulting. So I think that the residents largely feel that the big issues are not being heard. The other thing about the Scoville estate is that it was built kind of quite brilliantly by council architects way back when in 1970 to be completely south-facing. So the architects, I think actually it works quite well. They designed the estate on an Italian hill town, which, is a little lofty, but it gives an amazing feeling about the estate. So even though it's largely, and some of it is private housing, it's mainly council housing, 70% or over. And it gives this wonderful feeling of facing south and at least receiving the sun. And this development will entirely block those views. So it's not just about loss of light. It's actually about loss of quality of life for very vulnerable residents who are mainly elderly.
Thank you. Councillor Whitton.
Yeah. I was going to ask about the double glazing. Say that you've been waiting for double glazing. Do you feel that this offer by Barclays is making the council put off your?
It does feel. I mean, I would defer to other members of the Scoville estate to really answer that. But it does feel as though something that had been being discussed and promised has suddenly been removed, and now it seems like it's only something that will happen if Berkeley gets this application. And I think that's made applicants angry, upset, and confused.
Any further questions for the?
Can I say something about the consultation process as well? I feel the consultation process, especially the relation we've had with the council, has been very good. And the thing is, we feel that they have been receptive to our concerns, and they're nodding and they're agreeing. And yes, this is good enough. And yes, we're also concerned. But then I read the report. I read the 300 pages, and our voices were not there. That was the disappointing thing. I didn't feel it was like a report that balances both sides to reach a conclusion. I felt it was a conclusion first, and then we adjusted around. Everything was, all the adverse effects were minor, negligible, less than severe, and it was just brushed aside. It was very clear, this is like, we want this development. That is at least the impression I got reading 300 pages, and we will adjust the facts to that conclusion, because our voices were not in those 300 pages.
I think the last thing about the consultation process, I mean, really from Berkeley, it's sort of the walkarounds. It's felt there's been a specific emphasis given to, well, let's just fix the 1 or 2 homes that have major adverse effects. It's vast, the amount of homes that have major adverse effects. But still, there's been this removing of people. That basically, what were they trying to say? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Yes, that still lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Merrill. I'm sorry. Raise your hand. Apologies. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions from members of the committee. So thank you, all of you, coming forward to give your testimony and your pointing out those concerns that you have. It's been really helpful. Certainly given us food for thought, both for talking to the applicants, I think, in terms of our decision. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to allow you to say one final thing if it is brief, but thank you, of course.
Thank you. Sorry. I guess my point is that we're a very tight-knit community. I've lived here for a long time. I've been in the area since 1995. I've lived here since 2000. And I think there's a definite feeling that one cut wounds us all. And that hasn't really been taken into a process. We'll just fix this area. We'll try and fix this. All of us. I think the issue of having such an enormous high density overshadowing the neighbourhood in front is really, really problematic.
Okay, can I just have one sentence on the interaction with the council? Just one sentence.
One final sentence.
For instance, Colin has assured me that I've been asking about what about the objections for the 22 applications? Are they going to be included in the final number of objections? I have been assured, yes, they will be. We haven't heard that today. You are referring only to the objections from the 2024. There were also 185 objections from 2022. That's why I said in my statement 600, because I added the 430 and the 185 right. From 2022.
Thank you. Yeah, if we have some clarification on that, actually, before we ask the objections.
Yes, Chair. The 2022 comments are summarised in the main report.
Right. Could we allow the officer just to complete answering the question? No, that's fine. Thank you. I understand.
Yes. So in terms of the objections that were made to the scheme originally, they are reported in the main report and they are summarised in the main report. And you asked me, absolutely, other people asked me, do we have to make those objections again? To which I said, no, you don't, because they will all be reported. And I think they have been reported. And the critical thing for the committee making a decision is taking into the balance the objections that you raised about height, about daylight and sunlight, and the report as referenced those older comments. So I mean, there's no intent on my part or Wings or any officers to sort of discount that or set that aside, which is why I told you we would put them in. I mean, the critical thing is points you're raising And in no means are we trying to little or reduce that kind of impact, which is reflected in the report.
Okay, and I think is it fair to say that whilst you're perhaps concerned about how the numbers are reported, that you think the report there aren't any issues that were raised in objection which you think are missing in the report?
No, it's just because I've been on the street talking to people a lot, and many people say, I've already objected.
Yeah.
Like before in 2022, and I said, no, but you have to again.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to verify, will you add up those two numbers? And yes, it's in the report, it is. 2022 was this much, 2022 was this much. But today around the table, you are only referring to the 20.
Reporting letter that came in. First, the people didn't know objection. They started adding letters. There are some in there that aren't reflected on the document side. Some of the earlier letters of objection are not written letter of objection.
Thank you for that. That's a helpful point. Okay, I'd like to thank you again very much for coming forward and sort of setting out your concerns. I'd like to ask you to return to the public seating area, and I'd like to ask the applicants or the applicants' agents to come forward to address the meeting. So, as I have previously done with the objectors, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself first, and then I'll give you 3 minutes to address the meeting.
Good evening, everybody. Joe Ward Oldham for Berkeley Homes.
Have 3 minutes.
I would like to start by thanking your officers for their dedication over the last 4 years, helping us to bring forward proposals in front of them. To be honest, I imagine they can't wait to see the back of us after 4 years. Borough Triangle has great potential. It's a well-connected brownfield site within the Elephant and Castle opportunity. It presents a rare opportunity to make a significant single contribution to Southwark's housing needs. It is inevitable that any application making efficient use of land, allocated site, will have an impact on neighbours. We don't pretend our proposal wouldn't. What this proposal would deliver is a thriving, diverse and welcoming neighbourhood with world-class architecture designed by Stirling Prize winners McQueen and Lavington. Your officers, as well as officers from the GLA, have assessed this application, concluded that the local impacts are outweighed by its public. Hopefully you will agree. I would like to thank the local community, local businesses, and in particular the traders operating within Mercato, their participation in our extensive consultation process, which has consisted of over 2,300 interactions. This has led to a better scheme. In response to local feedback, we have reduced the heights of the tallest 2 buildings by a net 6 stories, added 54 more social rented homes, triple the number of 4-bed social rent homes, created a larger, more vibrant public realm with increased greenery, added a long-term sustainable home for Mercato, provided an extensive business support package, including an on-site temporary food market, provided funding for new windows on the Scoville estate, as well as support for the estate's residents to make an application for neighbourhood SIL, make improvements to their landscape. In a very challenging environment, we have worked hard to deliver a comprehensive package of public benefits that include 892.
Sorry, I've just been asked. Could you perhaps speak a little closer to the microphone? So apologies for that.
892 sustainable new homes, a policy compliant 35% affordable housing, 153 social rented homes, almost 40% of which will be 3 and 4 bedroom homes for local families on your waiting list. 3,500 square meters of new public open space, 98 new trees, a 56% increase in biodiversity, 5,000 square foot community centre, 30,000 square feet of commercial space to be designed by Mercato, and 585 permanent jobs. All of these benefits will be stitched into the local neighbourhood, opening up this currently impermeable site to establish a truly mixed tenure community where residents can set down long-term roots. If approved, we will deliver this. Berkeley are builders at heart, and we deliver all of our schemes. We have a strong track record of delivery in Southwark, having delivered over 2,000 homes over the last 20 years. We seek your permission to continue this and deliver an exceptional place at Borough Triangle, with a fantastic package of homes, jobs, community space and public realm for the borough. Thank you. My team and I are available to answer.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm doing what I was telling everybody else off for doing. Thank you very much. I'm going to take some questions. So, Councillor Hicks, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of questions from directors that we heard from. The first was, could you just bring to life what would a 20% reduction in height over the two tallest towers mean in terms of viability of the scheme and the provision of social and affordable homes? And could you tell us a bit more about what the plan is for when the traders on the site can expect some more detailed plans around relocation?
Yeah, of course. So just you take your question one at a time. The first on reducing the height. So a 20% reduction in height is a very, very significant reduction in overall height, also the overall number of units. Collins mentioned the viability assessment that BPS reviewed has established that at 35% the scheme is in quite a significant deficit. If we were to reduce those heights, this scheme is very finely balanced. That would probably lead to a reduced affordable housing offer. That would mean we then no longer accord policies around affordable housing. So yeah, that type of reduction would render this scheme kind of very challenging to deliver. Just on height, just some context, establishing that the level of height proposed here, we're not the first person to establish this as the correct quantum height. Peabody Housing Association, who owned the site before us, also brought forward a scheme that includes buildings at height. I hope that's sufficient. In terms of traders, so I totally understand they will want more details. There's a sort of chronology of things that need to happen before we do that, and it would be sort of inappropriate for us to give them details we're not sure about. Very obvious, but we're not food hall operators. We're not really experts in that. We are working with people who know how to operate spaces. We're talking at many of the existing traders. There was a meeting mentioned that was on Wednesday. That's where we presented the sort of, it is very much a feasibility study. We undertook an assessment to make sure that a temporary food market fits on the site in an area that isn't taken up by the basement, so therefore able to stay there all the way through. All that was there to do was to make sure we weren't saying we could do something we couldn't, which was very detrimental. The feedback was really clear. There aren't enough seats. They need a communal kitchen. They need cold storage. We've already found some additional space that can be provided as a kind of garden rear. We understand that the kind of time in the year when that's needed the most, summer month, that's when that trade is really warm. So we hope that that will help with that point. We've also been looking at whether or not we can include additional seating on the roof of what we proposed to date. There is an existing basement on the Institute of Optometry. We're exploring whether or not that might be a really great place for storage, or perhaps like a dark kitchen per se, where they can maybe do some of the preparation. We need an operator, and the first thing we will go and do, should we be granted permission here, would be appoint one of those. We are talking to Democraft Brewery, who hear from later today. But the business relocation strategy it's a living thing, and it will be secured under the Section 106 agreement. That kind of process, the Section 106 process, goes on after committee. So we walk out of this room today, the business relocation strategy isn't necessarily exactly what it says it is now. It will be what we agree with traders and with the council. I hope that's clear.
Thank you. I'm going to take Councillor Pooler next, and Councillor Johnson.
Cheers, Chair. And thank you for your presentation. I want to focus on the traders and the commercial aspect of the scheme. Just coming back to the business relocation plan, of course, the fund's been increased to 100k quite recently. So there is an acknowledgement that the amount initially provided was in nature. Could you first and foremost explain what that 200k does, And can you also flesh out how the money is going to be allocated? Because I assume that there must be some internal area that you are applying when traders apply for those funds. And then also, and also my next question is that there was a lack of information about very specific fit out costs that will be associated. Of course, you noted that you get a separate operator to do all of that, but I'm going to assume that there is already a draft memorandum of understanding or some sort of draft agreement that you are going to propose to a variety of operators that they will look into. May I ask, has apologies, my mind is going a bit blank. Yeah, fine. There will be a raft of potential operators. I assume that there are internal, that there is an internal draft. Can I just get confirmation for you that operators will, operators and traders will be treated with first and foremost the utmost respect, but also that they are liaised with very closely in terms of the fit out costs that are very specific to the needs of their businesses, only because we've had situations in the past in which the fit out costs specifically for businesses haven't been taken into consideration, which has then subsequently led them to be in a situation where they are not able to then subsequently move into the new building. Thank you.
Is it all right if I just, there's quite a few, so I'm just going to kind of make sure that I've written them all down. So I think the first question I noted was, what is the relocation fund for? You then asked what's the process that someone might go through to obtain that? There was a point, it came back and round a bit, but around fit out costs. I'm just going to address the temporary food market and what the fit out will be and who will bear those costs. And then there was a question, I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I think it was saying the operator, what terms will Barclay make sure they behave under, and I'll also address that. To start with, we've had upwards of 65 one-to-one meetings with the traders, and over that time we've got to know the diversity of different businesses. They all have very different needs, they all see different challenges. It's through those different meetings that we've come to understand that when they need to relocate, all of the different costs that are associated with that, from agents fees to legal fees to the fit out costs to the actual just relocation, whether or not, if there's a period of void, that's challenging. If you're going to keep staff, you can't just get rid of your staff. If you're not operating for 2 weeks, you're still going to pay the staff. So we know what those things are for, but all of those things are covered by the relocation fund. The relocation fund will be administered by, applications will be made to a steering group. That steering group will be composed of members of Barclay, an applicant, also members of the council, and then finally also Tree Shepherd, who are, from Dipesh's presentation, proposed as a business advisory service. They will look at, okay, you found a place to move, what has the cost been to you, and then the application will be approved on the basis of proof of what those costs were. But there isn't as I keep saying, that this is sort of a live document and this isn't set in stone yet. And I don't think we have a strict set of parameters right now about what would or wouldn't be covered by that. I think if someone presented a reasonable cost to them, it was within the kind of general scope, then that would be acceptable. In terms of the temporary food market and its fit out, we, Barclay, will bear the cost of delivering the temporary food market. We will deliver each of the units as kind of ready to trade for whatever use that is. The expectation is most of those units will be for food, but it's possible one might be for a bar, I don't know. And the idea is, and we've been talking to Mercato and also German Craft Brewery, who kind of run the current market, about the possibility of recycling much of the kind of fit out that gives Mercato its current character into where we are now. And then in terms of an operator, we don't yet have a memorandum of understanding, but we are talking to operators, and we have a very clear idea of how that operates, a bit clunky. The most important thing here is that the traders are supported during the relocation, during the construction period. And so what that means is they will be charged no more rent than they're charged currently. We know from traders that the biggest challenge they have at the moment with Mercato is that the rent, it's a percentage of the revenue that they make, but there's also a minimum. And what's really hard is the trade in a market like this is very seasonal. So what that means is in the winter, they still have this minimum, and their revenue can be much lower. And therefore, from a management perspective, that's challenging. So any operator that we appoint will have no minimum. It will be a percentage of the revenue and net revenue, not gross revenue. So they currently get charged gross revenue. In terms of treating the traders with respect, we haven't worked out exactly what this is yet, but there will be a specific criteria and a series of measures that must be put in place, or any trader could be removed from the market. So let's just say, for example, 1 month a trader has had a bad month, or I don't know, something happened and they're not able to necessarily pay their rent. That doesn't just mean that the operator is allowed to remove them. We aren't operating this market as a kind of profit center. We are operating this to innovate those businesses. So we're not looking to drive as much rent as we can from an operator. We're looking to make sure they operate this market for the traders, so they're ready to go back into the permanent scheme when it's available.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to talk briefly about housing associations. There have been a few applications in the last year or so where the council has unfortunately been stung that despite genuine and sincere attempts by a developer to find a housing association to take on the social housing, no one's been willing to do it. And you'll understand that that has a significant risk factor to be considered when looking at the pros and cons of the scheme. Can you talk a little bit about how far your negotiations, your conversations are developing with Peabody or anybody else for that matter?
Yeah, of course. So just to start with, we have ongoing conversations as a business with all of the major RPs, housing associations. We are delivering homes across London for pretty much all of them somewhere. At the moment, as Colin said, the housing associations aren't really able to engage this early in the process. What I would say about this scheme, I don't know about the other schemes you're talking about, but there is a very large quantum of affordable housing. The 2 blocks are significant blocks. I don't know, because I don't know what you're referring to, but I do know broadly the issue with housing associations not being able to take things quite often occurs when it's a smaller quantum. The other thing I'd say, we have an entire division, our partnerships division, that maintains and continues relationships with all the housing associations. They normally queue up for our product because it's generally considered to be the highest quality. I've delivered affordable housing at Kidbrooke Village with L&Q, and the report I got from them is the fewest snags that we've ever had on an affordable home. So I feel very comfortable that when the time comes, we'll have a housing association to take those homes for us.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that point, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for nicking the question I was going to ask. But no, that's a good question. But what I just probe a little bit further on that point, I guess I was expecting with this site to hear, given Peabody's involvement in it, that you'd be a little bit further along the line in terms of the involved. And my slight concern, I respect what you say about the quality of your offer and how often housing associations take this. But the other thing we are noticing on some sites is that because the RP hasn't been involved from the start, they're not necessarily happy with the product that comes out. So it's really just to understand, how quickly are you going to be engaging an RP? And to what extent will that RP be able to determine some of these things? Obviously, a lot of the parameters are already set there. And what we don't want to have is a situation where something is approved in good faith by us on the expectation that an RP is going to be there. We then find, because of the difficulties that we've heard that RPs in general are facing, and they decide that actually what's here isn't quite right for them, and they walk away, and then you come back later saying, we can't find an RP for this.
That's fine. So I think there were kind of 2 questions there. One was around the design, and then I think the other is about when we actually will start to engage. So in terms of design, not to sort of blow our own trumpet, but we are obviously a big company delivering schemes all across London for housing associations, and we have, as I mentioned, a partnerships division. They literally help us make sure that we are designing all of our affordable buildings so that they are to the sort of requirements. As obviously each RP has a slightly different one, but generally they all want the same thing. So we're very confident that the way we've designed these buildings, no housing association is going to look at say, I'm sorry, I'm not that. The programme for this development doesn't actually see, I think this is based on what we think today, obviously might change, but the first affordable home will be delivered in about 7 or 8 years. It's obviously a very long time in the future, which is why it's sort of, we haven't already got a registered provider kind of signed up. Obviously, once, you know, if we were to be granted planning permission, I think those conversations would start, you know, fairly immediately. I can't speak to when we would have an agreement in place, just given those timeframes.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Fuller.
Cheers. I'll make mine a lot more shorter, if I may. That's all right. Could you explain why there is no affordable workspace in this scheme specifically? Well, of course, I know that you've moved towards a community space, but even with that, there is an overall reduction of community space. So, what was the methodology in terms of that?
Just to be clear, is your question why is there not on-site affordable workspace? Yes. So, as Wing mentioned, the only workspace building is Block E. It's not a huge building; it's about 900-ish square meters. I'm not quite. So if you take 10% of that, you end up with about 90 square meters. It's fairly impractical to carve out just a 90 square meter area in that building to be a workspace. Offers might confirm it's not uncommon where there is a smaller quantum of workspace for a contribution to be made, so that it may be consolidated by the council and delivered on a site in a kind of grander and more effective way. So that's kind of the thinking behind that.
Thank you. Not seeing Councillor Merrill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just want to understand your consultation with the estate and how that's worked, where the double glazing idea has come from. Lots of light, double glazing isn't going to sort that problem out. They need to put their lights on and make the lights cheaper. By logical explanation. And an understanding on the estate and the way it was designed to be south facing to be able to better in it and just come to what the objectives said and how you will work with that estate in the future to make sure that you mitigate any upset, especially the old process, which is mentioned will be 8 years, a long process as well.
So again, if it's all right, I'll just make sure I'm going to capture each of those. So the first question was on the consultation process and how the estate had been involved. I think the second was how we'd come to the idea of double glazing. And then the third was about how we manage the impact of construction. That okay. Yeah, of course. So to start with consultation, I mean, we've consulted extensively. We consulted on the original application. We've consulted again with 5 public consultation events on the most recent. That's not just before we submitted it, that's also after. So we undertook what we called an application summary event at the Queensborough Community Centre on the Scoville estate once the application was submitted. Sure is user experienced, and I have because I had to proofread all the documents. These applications are growing in size these days. They are really, really large, and frankly, they're really difficult to understand. So what we tried to do is to take all of the key things that we had heard that were concerns for the Scoville estate and focus the information on those areas. So we had our daylight sunlight consultant, Alex, who here. He had the animation that was referenced, which is on our...
Sorry, can I just stop you? Sorry, the lady that's filming at the back, apologies. You're welcome to film what's going on at the front of the meeting, but please don't film other members of the audience without their permission. Sorry.
Slightly lost my place, but we we'd endeavoured to make sure that people could. Sorry. I'm just going to bring it right next to me. That's better. So during that consultation, we understood some of the issues that exist for people who live on the estate. To be absolutely clear, and Colin said the same thing, the proposed double glazing improvements and equally the support we provided in terms of trying to allow the residents to make an application for neighbourhood seal, that's not seen as a your light's affected, have this. It's a case of going, there is an application that we're trying to bring forwards. We acknowledge that there will be impacts on some of the neighbours, but what we want to make sure we do is try and make sure they benefit as much as they can in areas that they have the most need. And what we heard from those residents is our windows need upgrading. If those windows are upgraded, their energy bills come down. So I'm just picking up on your point. Then they would have they wouldn't have more money available to put the lights on. Your point. So that's the consultation. And so finally, you asked about the management of the construction period. So there's sort of two parts to this I'll talk about. We as a business are long-term custodians of our sites. They take a long time to build because they're normally quite big. We also remain involved with them long after they're finished. We produce community plans every year for all of our sites, and that involves continual community consultation, even once we've got planning permission, even once we've built the first phase. Part of that will be the construction environmental management plan, which is a condition of the application. We will create a specific community consultation action group who we will consult. Now, again, I'm not going to say there's not going to be an impact on people. It's going to be a big construction site, but what we will do is work with them to understand where their greatest concerns are and mitigate those impacts as much as is practical. We know dust and noise are likely to be kind of the biggest impacts. We will have very, very rigorous wheel washing and dampening of the ground within the construction site to prevent dust coming up. We will always take great attention looking at which activities are undertaken on site at which times, knowing that you don't really want to be driving piles into the ground at 8 a.m. when people might be in bed. It's better to probably focus those activities in the day. I hope that's a satisfactory answer.
Thank you. Councillor Whitton.
Juliet mentioned the sewers. Are you aware that the sewers are not capable of taking such large loads?
I'm aware that on the Scoville estate, there are concerns that the sewage system there does not work. As part of our application, as is true of any application, we have had to assess the ability of the local infrastructure in terms of potable, non-potable sewage or drainage from flooding, whether or not that can be taken by the local infrastructure. And we've consulted with all the kind of statutory organisations. So just to be clear that we might be mixing two things. I am aware, and I can't speak to what is going on in the Scoville estate, but our application won't exacerbate that issue. That's been assessed.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions. So thank you very much for going forward. Thank you for answering all the questions we put forward to you. As I said earlier, it'd be really helpful when you return. I think you're sitting at the front anyway, but there's a possibility there may be some follow-up questions and points later on in proceedings. So that'd be very helpful. Okay. Next part of the meeting is to see whether there are any supporters that wish to speak that live within 100 metres of the site. I had an indication I had somebody called Andrea Ferrario. Andrea, do you want to come forward? Right. So just to clarify, my understanding is you don't live within 100 metres, but you are one of the traders, and obviously we've heard about the concern.
Correct.
Is that correct?
I don't live in Elephant and Castle. I live in Camberwell, but I'm one of the traders of Elephant and Castle.
Okay. I'm going to give you, whilst that is a slight departure, I am allowed some discretion on this, and I think given the traders issue, I think it's that we're able to hear from you. So I will give you up to 3 minutes to talk to us.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea Ferrario. I'm one of the founder and director of Germancraft. Germancraft has been one of the longest co-tenants inside Mercato Metropolitano. In fact, I dedicate 8 of my last years. We started when we were 21, and I give my heart and soul to that place. In fact, we built it, probably half of Mercato is being built by us manually, and I personally friend and know most of the trader inside. We've been helping and incubating new business inside and outside Mercato. And in fact, a lot of people don't know that we are also shareholder inside Mercato because we've been helping and develop the whole sites. I need to say that Heracles has been supportive with us. I've been meeting with them first time 2 years ago. And when we started Mercato, they were in the landlord, were Peabody in, and everyone that joined Mercato had a break clause of between 6 to 12 months. So it's always been a better place. We all knew it. When Berkeley entered, it was the first time that lender actually had a communication with us. I had several meetings with them, and it's true, they show me the new temporary market, and they actually take over a lot of our feedback, which we went through a few meetings. I met Joe multiple times and Sam, and we went through like all the pain points, and they actually went through and worked with them. Now, saying that, we've been 8 years, and there's probably not many people knows Mercato as I know it. And I need to be honest that that place has been built with a conscious mind that it was a temporary place. That place, I need to say, in the last 12 months has not been performing as it was performing before, in my opinion, for that cause. The place is not anymore as that charmed as it before because it's getting old and it's getting tired. And I don't think it's on the level where it was before. I always been living through the ethos of Mercato, giving a place for the community, and I think it's important to stand for that principles. And I think community need a better place to stay. You need a better place, and not only in a temporary place, but even in the future. Saying that, I have no idea if I will be one of the people that will be pick up on the temporary or the future or the standing market, but they show me several places around the area with the criteria they gave it, because we also have a production site inside Mercato. And over 8 years, we had more than 300 people working for us. And they show us multiple sites where we could put the brewery and establish a new location.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I've got a question from Councillor Edwards.
Thank you for that. As you can probably see, we're getting slightly contradictory messages from two representatives of the traders, which is fine because people will have different perspectives. But one of the things we heard earlier was there was some of the objectives coming forward said that they had spoken to other traders and that there was a lot of fear and suspicion. They were worried about coming forward, and the relationship with Barclays was, I think, to characterise what they were saying, kind of distrustful. They weren't necessarily trusting them very much. Whereas you're giving a very different perspective, a much more positive perspective on what the potential of this change might be for the traders. Can you explain why there's that disparity between those two sets of perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was quite shocked as well to hear that, because it was a bit different from what I perceived from vendors. Because it's true, there's a lot of vendors that might not speak loud because they're small vendors, they're not native from here as myself. But I had a lot of people that have been scared maybe from the landlord because it's a bigger figure and everything, and came to chat to me, and I personally listened everything, and I never heard about like being scared of being kicked out of the place, but it's mostly scared of that the place it will not be suited or like welcome enough people or being exactly the same ethos behind. I think when the guys did the last week, the meeting with them, they were listening most of the pain point, and I hope that they will address it for the new project.
Councillor Papula.
Cheers, Chair. You noted in your presentation that there was slight uncertainty in the fact that effectively lottery that that will be chosen applicant is clear, they're still uncertain about that criteria. What gives you the confidence in a sea of uncertainty that the applicant is going to deliver everything that they have said?
You asked me what's my confidence that Berkeley's will deliver. Well, I cannot speak for them absolutely, but yeah, for myself, I think something that we're forgetting at the moment, that's what I was saying, that people was supposed to have between 6 to 12 months. That's not also enough to establish your business and to give it like the security to continue after. Building something that is going to be stable, having longer lease, or anything, it will help you to establish your business, build your clientele, and if you want to grow, hopefully raise money to build new location and expand yourself. Obviously, having a small business is beautiful, but people want to grow as well. They want to have security in their own business as well, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any further questions? I want to thank you very much for coming forward to talk to us. I think it's really helpful to get your perspective on this.
Thank you so much.
So thank you for coming forward. If you'd like to return to the public seating area, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to Ward Councillor. Now, I had a brief discussion before this meeting with Councillor Linford Hall, who I understand Councillor Chamberlain wants to address us and use the 3 minutes as Ward Councillor, which of course we'll move on to shortly. Councillor Linford Hall also wanted to talk as a councillor for another affected ward. I'm mindful, because I want to be consistent in how we address these things, that when we had the biscuit factory site, we allowed 3 minutes for the North Bermondsey councillors to talk there, but also allowed a statement from the South Bermondsey councillors to be read out. So I do want to be consistent in this. So I'm going to allow Councillor Chamberlain to speak for us for 3 minutes, but I am also going to allow Councillor Linford Hall to address us after that. Okay. All right. Councillor Chamberlain, do you want to come? So if you'd like to introduce yourself, so to those of us who don't know you, and then you have 3 minutes to address.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Victor Chamberlain. I'm one of the Liberal Democrat members of Borough and Bankside Ward. Chair, members of the committee, I'm here to speak on behalf of local residents who strongly object to this application because they believe that the harms significantly outweigh the benefits. Let me be clear, we are not opposed to development on this site. In fact, most residents agree that we are facing a dire housing crisis and want to see new homes, particularly social homes, built in our community and including on this site. But this proposal does nothing to address that crisis and falls drastically short of what our community needs and deserves. As ward councillors, we have gone out of our way to engage the community in good faith. We've held 3 public meetings. We've hand-delivered thousands of letters about the application. We've worked with the developers from the very start to ensure the community's voice was heard. We approached this process objectively, hoping to see a scheme that worked for local people. But the near unanimous voice from residents across Borough and Bankside, St George's and Chaucer wards is this. This is not a good development. It is not sustainable. It is not right for this site. The affordable housing offer is simply unacceptable. Out of 892 homes, just 153 offer a social rent. That is 17%. Another 77 are so-called affordable or intermediate homes. Let's put that into perspective. That's shared ownership. In SC1, the average 1-bed sells for £659,000. At a shared ownership affordable rate, that would be still over £527,000. That is 16 times the average salary of a Southwark worker. Completely out of range for the vast majority. Southwark has 19,000 families on our housing waiting list, 2,853 in SC1 alone. This scheme will help only a tiny fraction. It is a wasted opportunity on one of the last few remaining major sites in SC1. It also fails to meet the council's family homes policy. It's meeting 13.2% as the committee discussed. Our policy is 20% in the central activity zone. This policy does not account for the fact that even in the town centre zone, it is not meeting it. These reasons alone on the affordable housing and lack of family housing should be enough for the committee to reject this application, in addition to all the other great reasons you've heard tonight. The design is fundamentally unsustainable. The circularity statement is little more than greenwashing. It includes no binding commitments, no material reuse from other sites, and it admits that 0 kilograms of material will be reused. It leans heavily on concrete, which we know is not reusable and is high carbon. Contemporary design is moving toward regenerative principles. This scheme does not do that, and it does not meet the Council's climate policy. Berkeley Homes made £550 million profit last year. For them to try and plead poverty on affordable housing on this site, it simply doesn't wash, and the council should be challenging that more robustly. Berkeley could have brought forward a scheme that delivered real community benefit. Instead, they prioritised profit again, and this administration is allowing them to do so. Committee, there are 431 public comments that have been submitted to this application, 408 objections. That is overwhelming. That is 95% opposed. Chair, members of the committee, we don't oppose development of the site, but this is not good enough. It fails on affordability, policy and sustainability. It puts profit before people. Please reject it. I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Chamberlain? Councillor Edwards.
You say you're not opposed to development of the site. One of the issues that we heard earlier when the objectors were speaking was about the height of that tower, and suggestion was that there should be a 20% reduction, or that might be acceptable, a 20% reduction. And we subsequently heard about the issues that would cause with viability. Do you recognise that there is a serious issue between the viability of the scheme and whether or not you could reduce the height of the buildings?
My background is working in the built environment and development. I know there's lots of different ways you can cut a development site like this. And I know that from the very offset, the community has been consistently telling Berkeley that they need a higher proportion of genuinely affordable social homes on the site. They've ignored that request from the community. But let's be clear, Berkeley are still making a £52 million profit on this site. That is a huge amount of money. And we know that that's what they'd be making tomorrow if this was built out. What they'll make after the years of land banking that they'll probably do on this site actually means that they'll probably be making much closer to the £175 million, because that's how Berkeley operate. They are one of the big players that have their stranglehold on the housing market in London, in the UK, and we know how they're going to operate. They also, I heard them talking about great quality, affordable housing that they build. I'm in a shared ownership home built by Berkeley Group. It is full of cladding, and Berkeley are not engaging with the community on fixing that. That's only a stone's throw from this development site. I know that the height is an issue. I know there is different ways you can do the height and massing that would have been far more sympathetic to this community. I think the concerns that have been raised about the sunlight, the daylight, the incredible impact it will have on the Scoville estate, which have just been ignored and essentially railroaded over, actually is not good enough. You know, we should have been listening. If this was a genuine consultation and engagement, Berkeley would have been showing iterations of the design. Instead, it's consistently been that high level from the very offset, and is ignoring the question that was asked. Sorry, Councillor, you also asked the second part of your question. One was about height, and the other was viability. Well, I think the answer is I think that this is a viability assessment that wasn't done in-house by Southwark Council. You know, we should be knowing far more robustly how to challenge viability. Do you know, Councillor, how to challenge a viability assessment? Because if you do, have you done that on this scheme? Because I don't think the numbers add up. I think we can be demanding far more higher levels of affordable housing. Just to
clarify at this point, I think we have heard from had an independent viability assessment,
but not in-house, Chair. Not in-house.
But it was independent. It wasn't the assessment we got from Barclays, so it was commissioned by the council.
Is that a question?
No, I was just correcting some information that you gave.
I didn't say it wasn't independent. I said that it wasn't done in-house, and I would have more confidence in it if it were carried out by council officers who have a vested interest in making sure that our council policy particularly on affordable housing, is delivered.
That clarification. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. How would you describe your interactions with Barclays? How have they been when you have, I imagine you've had conversations with them representing residents' concerns. How have those conversations gone?
Sorry. Sorry, there seems to be a crackling. Do you want to use the other microphone, Councillor Chamberlain? That might improve things. Apologies.
I have engaged with Barclay from the very offset on their proposals. You know, they, as I mentioned, we've held 3 public meetings. I think the Barclay have been invited to 2 of them. You know, and I think that has been sort of bookended around trying to engage with the community to make sure that they had a chance to have their voice heard. But as I say, I think there hasn't been that iterative design process. This has not been a co-design project. This has not been one where I feel that the views of the community have actually affected the end result in any way. You know, the original prospect was, you know, very similar, and to a layperson's perspective, almost identical to the scheme that's in front of you today. And I think that doesn't show a developer or that's actually genuinely looking to listen and engage with the community, particularly when, you know, we've been extremely clear as a community that we need to see far more higher levels of genuinely affordable homes on this site. We need to see more family homes on this site. There are serious issues that have been raised about, you know, the impact it will have on services. This is something Barclay haven't engaged in. You know, the Thames Water have said that the existing network in this area is not capable of taking on more 900 new homes. That's actually in your report in paragraph 938. We know that the overshadowing is something that, you know, residents have raised serious concern about. They've asked to see the studies from Barclay. Barclay have said that they do them. They've shown them at a meeting, but when we asked to actually scrutinise them in depth and ask for an independent study to challenge it or to check that they're comfortable with what they're proposing, they haven't been provided. So they haven't been forthcoming when we've actually tried to get under the bonnet and look at the detail as a community. I think, you know, as I mentioned, the impact on GPs, on dentists, on transport infrastructure. The tube network is already at full capacity in the area. You know, we know that extra added demand without greater capacity isn't going to be met, isn't going to help our community to incorporate a development like this. There are heritage concerns that we've raised, particularly about how the development will look from Trinity Church Square, from the Albert Triangle, from West Square, from London Bridge. You heard it all before. You know, we've asked them to look at these issues, and I don't feel that those concerns about the impact of heritage and how the heritage building on the site have actually been listened to. There is, as you've heard, and it's discussed extensively, you know, real concern in the community about the displacement of traders. Mercato Metropolitano was described as being at the heart of the community, and I've lived in Borough for 10 years. I would completely agree with that. It's somewhere people of all different socio-economic groups come together and can enjoy and benefit from. And the fact that we are potentially losing something and not getting something that's like for like back isn't good enough from a community perspective. And that has been really clearly reiterated. And, you know, I know there has been some change on sort of the deal that has been offered to traders, but that has only been through really, you know, pushing Barclay to do better on that. And I still think tonight you're still hearing from some of the traders that they don't feel that they're getting a good enough deal, that there is an equalities impact to that too. You know, a lot of the traders are SMEs, they're sole traders, they are, you know, people that are trying to run a small business and, you know, got family locally. They are potentially going to be put out of business because of this development. You know, there's no guarantee that they're coming back. Even if it's being said that they're going to get first refusal, that is not a guarantee, just to be clear. I could go on. I mean, the community centre, again, we've said there's lots of need for community space. You know, as there is across Southwark, we need a lot more community spaces. But we've said engage with the local community in this part of SE1 about what would be an appropriate use of that space. And you know, the developer has come back and said, well, you know, we've been told that it's going to be for the Latin American community. but that may well be the appropriate use for it, but that hasn't been done through engagement with the wider community. So I think, if I'm going to sum up, I'd sort of say that I feel that we've raised the issues. We've tried to give Berkeley a really good chance to address all the issues that you're hearing tonight. But I don't feel that, the scheme has actually evolved in any meaningful way as a result of all that engagement.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question. You mentioned the figure of 17% social housing, and you claim this therefore wasn't meeting policy. Clearly our report makes very clear that it's 25% habitable rooms, 25.1% habitable rooms, and a further 9.9% other affordable housing. So clearly it does meet the way our policy in terms of how that's set out. Now, you were suggesting that we use this as grounds to recommendation. Would you concede that, first of all, this does meet our policy in the way it's set out in our policy? And secondly, if we were trying to use that as grounds for refusal, that the likelihood is that a planning inspector would throw this out very quickly?
I accept that the council are saying it is a policy compliant application. I think, that let's remember 35% is a minimum level. That is about actually meeting a threshold. And this is the bare minimum, even at 35%. But we know, let's just be realistic, intermediate housing is not affordable in this location. So, you're being disingenuous if you're saying that it is a policy compliant scheme, because we know that it isn't genuinely affordable for the majority of people that live or need affordable housing in this location. I also say, Chair, that is just one of the many issues with this application that I would encourage the committee to take into account. That would give it a very strong grounds for refusal and an excellent chance of being able to withstand appeal.
Can I just?
And sorry, the point I think I also made about why it would be strong.
You used a statement there, which I think you suggested.
I said it would be disingenuous to pretend that intermediate affordable housing like shared ownership would be a genuinely affordable offer in this location, because it isn't. The point I did make about grounds for refusal was actually about the lack of family housing meeting our 20% requirement in this area, because it isn't. It's 12.1 or something, 13.2. So it's that is grounds on its own for the fact that we have not enough affordable housing. The South East London SHMA, which is all about how much affordable housing do we need in different parts of London, said that we need to have by 2031 35.7% 3 and 4 bedroom homes. This is nowhere near that, is it? So how are we going to get there in the next decade if we don't start making significant interventions like this, which we've got the opportunity to do?
Councillor Edwards.
So just to follow up on that, really, because I don't think you answered the question. Either it is policy compliant or it isn't from the point of view of the planning inspectorate. So we have to bear that in mind tonight if there is an appeal to the planning inspectorate. Either it is compliant or it isn't. And as Councillor Livingston just set out on the numbers, it is compliant. Do you accept that that is the case as a matter of fact, not as a matter of opinion, but as a matter of fact?
I've read the report and it says it's policy compliant.
Councillor Papoon.
Chair. Councillor Chamberlain, as a ward councillor in the area affected, could you speak more about your engagement with the local traders? As you noted, most of them are ethnic minority, and could you surmise roughly the feedback that you received from them? The reason is because we received conflicting info about their engagement with Berkeley Homes, but also about their confidence about being able to stay on the site in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. I can speak to this to some extent. I know that from the first public meeting that we held, that a number of traders came to the public meeting and raised concerns about the fact that You know, Mercato hadn't said anything to them about the application. They had not engaged with them as the traders. You know, Barclay was engaging with Mercato as an entity, not with the individual operators within the Mercato metropolitan site, and that was clearly not acceptable. And that, you know, that they were concerned about the future of their business and what that would mean to them. So that is one of the things that has changed throughout the last couple of years. In that, I know as a result of us raising concerns and the council thankfully intervening and supporting this too, and Colin has been extremely helpful in that. They have actually, you know, done better at making sure that the individual traders have more of an understanding about the impact it will have. I know as someone that goes to Mercato and talks to them when I'm buying, you know, food or going for a drink, that you know, a lot of them don't know. They feel real anxiety and uncertainty about what their future holds. I think you've heard tonight about the fear of the unknown, and I think that's genuinely true. I think that comes across when you speak to individuals that are affected by this, because you know, it's their livelihood, and you know, and what's being proposed will not be like for like, and it is also so far in the future. If you're a small sole trader, you cannot plan that far in the future, particularly with sort of the uncertainty of the guarantees.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Chamberlain? No? Councillor Chamberlain, I want to thank you very much for coming forward. It's always really useful to hear from all councillors, so thank you very much for coming evidence to committee. Thank you very much. So Councillor Linford Hall, would you like to come forward? So, as I said earlier, I will allow you to introduce yourself and then give you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to say something. The reason why I'm in here and I wanted to add something to so many questions and so many speeches is because my colleague, Councillor Graham Neal, and I had been receiving an enormous amount of phone calls and an enormous amount of messages about the concerns of the areas in our ward which are going to be affected by this development. So I have two questions to ask. It's not that I'm speaking, it's just questions. The first one is in conservation and heritage protection. I have to put my glasses for this. How does this project align with Southwark's own policy to protect and enhance conservation areas, given the significant disruption to historic views and streetscapes? So that is one of the questions. The other question that I want to ask is about flood risk and infrastructure. As an assessment has been done and whether the existing drainage infrastructure can support 900 plus new dwellings, and if not, what upgrades are planned? And also, if the application gets approved and passed, I would like to propose this as a condition so that something can be done, that you can do an assessment about the drainage, because the drainage is archaic, is Victorian drainage. And at the moment, lots of the estates in my ward cannot cope with the state of the drains. It's a lot of flooding, it's a lot of upsurge, it's a lot of problems. Can you imagine with such a big development, what is going to happen? So I will please ask that if the application is passed, can you put this as a condition that something be done about it and look seriously on the drains and the infrastructure?
Thank you very much.
So it's no question, it's no...
No, I think those are really important points. Are there any questions that members of the committee have?
So it's no questions. I'm not wanting questions. It's me who's asking.
Oh, I know. Sorry. Just to clarify, we will get answers on both of those points for you, Councillor Linford Hall. But obviously, as you're speaking here and you are a local ward councillor, just to see if anybody had any points they wanted to ask you. So I don't think they are. But thank you very much for coming forward, and we will make sure those questions are responded to before we take a decision. So thank you very much, and I'd like to ask you to return to public seating area.
Very kind, thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to start there with those 2 points that Councillor Linford Hall made. So first of all, I'm going to go with the second one first, actually. So the issues about flood risk and infrastructure and the sewage and drainage and what conditions they either are or we need to put in place to ensure that that issue is addressed. Dipesh.
Yes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for that question. So, Thames Water in their comments did mention that the current sewage system is under pressure and may not be able to cope with this number of homes. We have recommended on condition 43 that prior to the occupation of each relevant phase, details of water upgrades should be provided to that condition. Councillor Linford Hall mentioned is recommended.
Okay, so that's covered. That's really helpful. And the other question was, I think I'm probably turning to Michael about this, about how this proposal aligns with the council's priorities around preserving heritage.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the question related to heritage and particularly conservation areas, I've elaborated that in my presentation, but yes, that is the test in law that we're required to consider how the proposal preserves or enhances the character and appearance of a conservation area, and that we're satisfied that what we've done is we've highlighted where there is harm arising, and we've presented to the committee as decision makers the planning balance that needs to be taken into consideration in this case. So we are satisfied that we have met that test. We've addressed that test fundamentally as it is set out in policy, and as for decision makers to take that. The test also allows the planning balance to be taken into consideration in arriving at a decision. And in this instance, the committee members are invited to consider all the public benefits arising from the development in that planning balance before making your decision.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm going to ask one further question of officers, which is obviously, I think, one of the key concerns. I think that was sort of came forward quite clearly is, we heard 2 different points of view from traders. One that seemed to think there was quite a good level of engagement. One that was very concerned about, whilst they thought, perhaps the offer that was made sounded attractive, they were really concerned about the detail about that and what was going to be implemented and when. So it was really to see what we could do to perhaps give some assurance on that if we were to agree this. And so what I'd like to suggest, if it is all right with officers and committee, is that if we do approve this, I would like this committee, I would like whatever the agreement is as part of the Section 106 for those arrangements with traders to come back to this committee to consider. So I just wanted to check with officers whether that would be all right and whether the committee would think that was a helpful suggestion. Sorry, Councillor. So what I would like is there is, as part of, if we do agree this application, there's a Section 106 there about what they need to do in terms of business relocation and those other measures that we asked for that exceptionally to come back to committee for approval before signed off and final permission. So that's what I'm going to check with officers.
Yeah, the agreement will be contained within the 106 obligation, but it's certainly possible for the details of that part of the obligation within the 106 to be reported back to committee, because I think Laura's point was having that certainty that the thing that was eventually agreed, and as Joe covered, it's a bit of a work in progress. So the obligation in draft can certainly come back to committee for your consideration when additional detail has been worked through and that hopefully would give a bit more certainty to Laura and other traders. So yes, it's perfectly doable if like, we feel that would be helpful.
And I'm seeing some they are fairly faint, but some faint nods from the applicants would be okay with that. Okay, all right, thank you, that's helpful. Okay, any further questions arising from the presentations that members would like to ask about? Are there any points that came forward in those presentations, that you sort of new points that we felt hadn't been covered earlier? Seeing any patients? I think we probably are moving towards the discussion on the decision. So I'm going to try and set out my thoughts, and then obviously I'll welcome contributions from other people. Clearly, this is a very sizable development on a key important site in Southwark. And I think, for me, there's a number of issues here that we need to find the right balance on. So there are clearly some very positive aspects to this. I think those positive aspects include the fact that we are getting new social homes, new family-sized social homes. We have got a total of 153 new social housing units, which is helping 153 people that are on our housing waiting list to get the home that they need, 150 households, rather, families, to get the homes they need. I think there's some very positive aspects here in terms of the public realm that's being created, the community space that's coming forward, and what the conservation aspects in terms of the buildings that have been retained on the site, bring those back into use. I am also mindful of what I'd said earlier in terms of what we need to do to bring back the issues on details of what's happening with the traders. I do think there's been some good engagement with Barto, and I think we do need to remember this is a meanwhile temporary use that was established on this site, and so actually this enables something which I think, as we've heard from everybody, is something that's really valued now in the borough, to be retained and to be sustained in the community and have a permanent future in the community. I think is definitely something that's very positive. On the other side, we clearly can't get away from the fact that this is a sizable development which is very tall, and that has, I think, two separate impacts. First of all, because actually interesting, I think there's different elements of it have these different impacts in terms of that height. So first of all, I think probably most concerningly for members of the committee is the impact on the Scoville estate in terms of the daylight and sunlight impacts. And the reason I say it's slightly different is the building, as we sort of ascertained, that has the biggest impact on that is not the 40-storey building or the 36-storey building. It's the 18-storey building, which is on the corner of Newton Causeway and Borough Road, which, okay, well, I did ask that question earlier of officers, and officers did suggest that was the case. Okay, well, right, okay, well, we've tested that and asked officers about it, and we haven't. We unfortunately we can't look at that, but I take on board what you say. But what clearly is an impact is the taller buildings clearly do have an impact on a number of heritage aspects in terms of what happens at Trinity Church Square, and I think also, as we've also heard about, the overshadowing that would be of Mint Street Park as well. So I think there's a number of things there that we need to take in balance. Now, my view on balance is, first of all, as I said, for me, my highest priority when it comes to planning issues is, are we getting the homes that people need? And for me, the fact that we are resolving the housing problems for 153 families on our council housing waiting list is not something we can ignore or dismiss in terms of making our decision. For me, that's always pretty much the thing that has the highest weight. Yeah, I have been happy to oppose applications when they aren't delivering our affordable housing numbers, and I'm saying this perhaps particularly for the ears of Berkeley as they are in the room. You know, I am very concerned when applications come not policy compliant when it comes to affordable and social housing. But this application does, and it does meet that test. And I think that is something that we do need to recognise and consider in our decision on this. And I think given that and some of what has been done to meet the needs of both the Mercato traders and also other interested parties such as Ministry of Sound, which have a long interest in planning issues here and is supportive of this application, which is no mean feat in my experience. I am therefore minded to vote in favour of this application. So those are my thoughts at the moment. I am also obviously willing to listen to the views of other members of the committee. Councillor Pooler.
Cheers, Chair. It's been a fairly long evening. It's been quite interesting to hear speeches from all sides in terms of this application. I completely agree that first and foremost, the greatest weight it should be placed on the provision of truly affordable social homes in an area that desperately needs it, as Councillor Chamberlain had noted in his speech. But I do have real concerns. I have significant concerns and reservations with regards to the scheme in its current iteration. It is quite clear from the rural report that it does meet the 35% threshold, but the scheme is clearly in breach of P2 of our policy in terms of family homes. It's not it doesn't fail it by a small margin, it fails it by a significant margin, and that hasn't been remedied whatsoever. I'm also fairly uncertain about how the traders are going to be treated on site as well. Most of them, or all of them, have a BAME background, and historically, I'm not stating that the applicant has done this, but historically, they have been treated with not the greatest of respect. Frankly, I think the vagueness of the business relocation plan leads me to believe that there are going to be difficult conversations moving forward. Of course, it's fantastic that the amendment put forward by the chair, in which the business relocation plan, when it's more fleshed out, will come to planning committee. But is it going to be of sufficient weight and scope and money as well? I don't think so. The 200k, as noted, was fought for very hard, but 200k in the grand scheme of things, in my personal opinion, isn't going to go far enough. There was mention about the fit out costs with regards to the temporary relocation, but there was nothing really about the permanent fit out costs. And also, there is a lack of guarantee or closer guarantee that many of these businesses are going to be able to return. I didn't hear that or proactively hear that, and that does give me grave concerns, especially because many of these traders, English is not their first language. They're not going to be able to navigate the system as nimbly as we all would hope, and I just don't have the reassurance that the applicant is going to do that as well. I've also got slight concerns with regards to the community space. Of course, it's been noted, no affordable workspace that's been transitioned into into the community space. I think in the grand scheme of things, that's all right. But my concern is that it is smaller, and it's being justified as smaller because it is of a higher spec. It is still smaller. There is no guarantee that that a Latin American group will take up that space. It's been noted by officers that they are speaking to Latin American people in the area, but just to be quite clear, Latin American people are not a homogenous group, and they're not going to randomly aggregate towards us because they are one sort of group. So the notion that the exemption of P31 applies here, I don't believe applies here, because we've not gone far enough to find a community group who will then subsequently take up that space. So it fails in that sense, in my personal opinion. And then also, I think the daylight and sunlight has been made very clear by officers and residents in the area that it is extremely bad. It is extremely bad, and personally, would I want to live next to a site in which the daylight and sunlight is that badly affected? The answer is no. And there is a lack of mitigation, in my personal opinion, from Berkeley's to show and demonstrate that enough care and attention has been taken to that. So Chair, I am minded to review this application.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, like you, Chair, I place a very high value in the decision on this with regard to the provision of affordable and social rent homes. For me, that is the most important thing, because many of us, speaking to local residents here, time and time again, of people who simply don't have the homes that they need. And that is incredibly important. And I am tired of hearing people sometimes, I think, disingenuously claim that they want those homes to be built, but aren't prepared to take the difficult decisions that are required in what is a difficult policy and fiscal environment to get the homes built. And in that situation, what you end up with is with politicians who've got clean consciences, supposedly, but families and children who don't have homes to live in. And that's not a road I'm prepared to go down, because, 40, 50, 60% of nothing is nothing. And I think that's unacceptable for the people and the families and the children who need homes. I do take very seriously the negative impacts that we've heard about in great detail this evening. I was particularly concerned to hear about some of the things that was said about the situation of the traders. However, I was also quite reassured by the contribution that we heard from one of the supporters who's a business owner themselves. And clearly there's a very mixed picture amongst the traders. It's not, as you said, Councillor Papula, it is not a single homogenous group, but also in the sense of the opinions that they are expressing about this proposal. And there's clearly a significant amount of concern and anxiety, I recognise that, but also a significant amount of support for the potential positive benefits that will come as a result of the delivery of this scheme. And it would be wrong to ignore that positive side simply because we've also heard about some of the anxiety as well. So I think that also leads to me, along with the considerations I've already set out, about the desperate need for us to build more homes because they are so desperately needed. So I also am intending to support this scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't the first time we've looked at an application and wrestled with what is an imperfect development, because I think it's probably nigh on impossible to create a perfect development in the centre of London. There will always be an impact, in which case the question is this good enough? I don't think it is. I'll explain why I don't think it is, and I don't think it's an easy call. I am concerned about the overdevelopment. I'm particularly concerned about the impact on the Scoville estate, and the testimony from who actually live on the estate is pretty compelling. I'm concerned and disappointed about the percentage of affordable family homes, the impact on Trinity Square, the impact on traders. Each one of those individual concerns is probably not enough to stop this application, but in aggregate, I think they are. So I can't support this.
Councillor Whittam.
Thank you, Chair. I've been doing this on the committee for a long time, and I think one of the most difficult things is that, as Councillor Johnson said, nothing's ever perfect. But I have learnt that we need to consider the fact that if we do reject, will it get past appeal? And I think there is enough in this application that it would be given permission on appeal. That doesn't mean to say we shouldn't consider fighting, but they haven't got the skin in the game, the planning inspectors. They're looking at cold hard facts. And the fact that it does meet our affordable housing target and does relocate the those sole traders. It gives most of the things that we are asking for. The only thing I would feel we need to make sure is that the people on the Scoville estate get something out of it. And I don't think double glazing is what should be given, because the council should be doing that anyway in their great estates. So, you know, they're being shortchanged there. The double glazing should be done in any case. So there should be something else for the Scoville estate residents, I believe. But I do think it would pass an appeal test, and for that reason, I feel I can't reject it.
Thank you. Councillor Hicks.
Thank you. Continuation on a theme from the other members on the committee. My reflection is this is not a perfect scheme. I think it's far from a perfect scheme. I don't think many schemes are perfect, but particularly in terms of this scheme. So for me, it's the impact on local heritage and the conservation areas that we've talked about, the impact on neighbours, particularly the Scoville estate, which we've heard from residents of that estate about, and the impact on local businesses and traders in the Mercato particularly. When I'm weighing up these decisions, for me, the level of housing need we have in the borough and the need to build really truly affordable homes, social homes in the borough is paramount. So on balance, given that and the positive elements of the scheme that include the green space, the public realm that you talked about, Chair, the new home for the market, and I think also some of the thoughtful elements of the design in terms of the noise, not threatening the future of the Ministry of Sound, which is an important local entertainment venue, and also the conservation of some of the buildings on site, the facades, and also the fact that the height and massing, in my view, as it was been noted in the report, is appropriate for this central city location. Means for me, on balance of all of that, I'm minded to vote in favour of approving the application.
Thank you. And Councillor Merrill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This has been a long evening, and after 14 years of doing planning in and out on these committees, there's no such thing as a perfect plan. There's a couple of bits that I've drawn on from experience here. So the trader's point of view, and I'm glad you've asked to see the agreement there from bitter experience from my own ward and being traders there, that having that reassurance that's coming in for us to oversee gives me some sense of fault in that. The other element of it is the housing that this provides, the 153, is what is fantastic. But I take your point as well. What we need more of is family homes as well. But also, what I am considering is the effect it will have on our existing council tenants that we have an obligation to as well, and what that the development will do with them for them. And I don't believe we're getting enough mitigations in place to make their life better than what it is now. Let's put it that way. So they may be losing the light, but there's other things that could be done to make their life easier and better that this development could contribute to. Double glazing, I think that was just blacked out in there. There's other things that could have been done that would make their bills cheaper in the longer term. So I will be mindful, and it rarely happens that I do this. I will be mindful to reject this application as it stands at the moment.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. You've heard from every member of the committee. I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraphs 1 to 7 of the report, page 47 of the agenda pack, namely that, first of all, planning permission is granted subject to conditions as set out in the report and the addendum report and the completion of the section 106 legal agreement, of which the aspect in terms of business location would need to come back to this committee. And the Director of Planning Growth be authorised under delegated authority to make any minor modifications to propose conditions arising out of the detailed negotiations with the applicant, which may necessitate further modification and may include the variation, addition or deletion of conditions as drafted, and the environmental information be taken into account as regard to Regulation 26(1) of the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Regulations 2017 as amended, and that Planning Committee, in making this decision, has due regard to the potential qualities impacts that are outlined in the report, and that following the issue of Planning Commission, the Director of Planning and Growth writes the Secretary of State notifying the decision pursuant of Regulation 31A of the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations, and that following issue of the Planning Commission, the Director of Planning Growth shall place a statement on the statutory register pursuant to Regulation 28 of Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations and for the purposes of Regulation 28(1)H, the main reasons and considerations for which the local planning authority's decision is based shall be set out as in this report, and set finally that in the event the requirements of paragraph 1 above are not met by the 26th of July 2025, the Director of Planning Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission if appropriate for the reasons set out in paragraph 949 of the report. Does any member, sorry. So I mentioned that when we did item 1 in terms of completion of section 106, so that was set out when I stated that. So does any member of the committee wish to? Oh, that was about business relocation. The double glazing is there. So does any member of the committee wish to second this recommendation? I've seen Councillor Eckwood seconding that. So we're going to take a vote on the recommendation. So
Can I ask if we can have some better list?
right. So I'm going to take that as potentially an amendment. Can we? Sorry. Well, so do you want to speak to your microphone?
Yeah. So Councillor Whittam, in the Section 106 Heads of Terms, the double glazing is estimated to cost about £1 million to complete. So you make the point that should that have been something that we could have paid for as the housing authority, we could if we had the money to pay for it, but we don't have the money to fund it. And so the and this is something we checked with the housing team So that's the reason why it's proposed as a mitigation. It's not usual for us to recommend the carbon offset funding go to a particular place, but in this instance, we feel there is a very direct relationship between the development and the people most affected by it. And there is also provision mentioned in the report, Section 106 monies, and also, as was mentioned by the applicant, the neighbourhood infrastructure levy to also improve, go towards other improvements on the estate, and that could include the playground and also landscaping on the estate, and also potentially to Queensborough Hall as well. And that will be subject to a bid for the neighbourhood sale, of which there is a considerable amount being paid over, somewhere in the region of £4 million. So there will be a lot of money available that can be bid for, and the monies identified in Section 106 for open space could also be spent on the estate, and that I think that was about £300,000. So quite a considerable amount of money that can also go to mitigations on the estate. They're already identified in the report.
So in addition to that, there's another 300,000. Okay, so we've had the motion moved and seconded. I'm assuming there's not an amendment. In that case, can I ask Councillor Whittam, how do you wish to vote on the application?
For, Chair.
Councillor Edwards?
For, Chair.
Councillor Hicks?
For, Chair.
Councillor Johnson?
Against the Chair.
Councillor Merrill?
Against, Chair.
Councillor Papula?
Against, Chair.
And I'm Councillor Richard Livingstone, and I'm voting for this application, and so the motion is carried and the application is granted. Now, I know this is a very difficult meeting for a number of people. I do think it's important that we had a good hearing of all the issues. It has been a lengthy meeting, and I know a number of you will be disappointed in the decision, but yeah, I hope that we're able to have good partnership working between Barclays and the local community going forward that will help perhaps take some of the sting out of all of that. And I would like to say we're now going to close the meeting. I'd like to wish you all a safe journey home.